Chapter 1847. Feng Ju, the third son of the Feng family in Xiangyang. He had lived a carefree and noble life since he was a child. He could be said to be the chosen one born with a golden spoon in his mouth. According to the theory of a famous psychologist, there were 5 kinds of human needs from low to high: physiological needs, safety needs, social needs, respect needs, and self-realization needs. As the youngest legitimate son of the first noble family in Dongqing, Feng Ju was doted on by his elders since he was a child. They gave him whatever he wanted, so he naturally had no shortage of the needs of the lower class. The psychologist once said that when the needs of a certain level were met, one would naturally begin to desire the next level. Feng Ju was naturally the same. He was born with something that others could not have. The remaining meaning of life was to pursue himself. In layman's terms, he was a teenager who thought about challenging the impossible all day long to make further progress in his life. Of course, his heart was lonely, because vulgar people could not understand his pursuit and ambition. Just when the world was in chaos, Feng Ju refused the letter sent by his eldest brother and second brother asking him to go home and stay there. He had to go out and find a wise master. Regardless of the feelings of his 2 brothers, Feng Ju's servant was a little broken down and wanted to cry. Tears fell down his face. Feng Ju's face was covered with dirt, and he scolded him angrily. "Why are you crying? You're so annoying. Shut up." The servant cried even harder. His voice was hoarse, and his tears turned from one to a torrential downpour. He was very sad. He was not crying about how his Langjun loved to court death. He was grieving that he was going to die at such a young age. Yes, he was going to die at such a young age. When they were crossing the mountains, they were caught by a nest of bandits. They were now in the woodshed of the bandits' lair. The little servant felt that there was no hope of escape. Naturally, he wanted to cry to his heart's content. The bandits who caught them were all fiercer than the other. In short, the little servant was very scared. On the contrary, Feng Ju was very calm. "What's the use of crying?" The servant sobbed. "Third Langjun, this place is so remote. If something happens, I'm afraid your family won't know." Feng Ju said, "I didn't even cry. Do you think my life is less important than yours?" At this time, Feng Ju was young and full of vigor. He had the arrogance of a young man from an aristocratic family. The servant was speechless, but he did not dare to disobey. There was no other reason. If it weren't for the attendant dragging them down, Feng Ju wouldn't have been caught. The errand boy was frightened by the bandits who jumped out and kept clinging to Feng Ju, making it impossible for him to pull out his sword and causing Feng Ju to be captured by the bandits. In short, the errand boy was very timid now. He was afraid that he would be killed by the angry Feng Ju before he died in the hands of the bandits. I'm sorry, Langjun. I didn't mean to burden you." Feng Ju's mind was also in a mess at this time, and the boy's servant was making all kinds of noise in his ear. He really couldn't help but go down. The errand boy muttered insensibly, "Actually, if San Langjun hadn't run away from home." Feng Ju said angrily, "Shut up. Did he run away from home?" He was fumbling ahead for his ideals in life. Mediocre people did not understand his pursuit and ambition at all. After the master and servant had heard each other for a while, the door of the woodshed that had been closed for a long time finally opened. A few tall and burly figures stood at the door against the light. Feng Ju's heart tightened, but he also knew that this was not the time to panic. The bandits did not kill them on the spot or interrogate them, mostly because the master and servant still had some value. The negotiation would most likely affect the lives of the 2 of them. In any case, saving their lives was the most important. They could not let these bandits think that the master and servant were fat sheep that could be easily slaughtered. When the time came, they would kill the hostages of the Feng family. After all, no one could escape unscathed after offending the Feng family. It was better to kill the hostages and end all troubles once and for all. However, they could not let the bandits think that the 2 of them had no value at all. For the bandits, the worthless captives were too old and sour, even if they were chopped up and fed to pigs. Only when the value was not high or low, and they found the right position, could they survive safely. If it really did not work, Feng Ju could still hide his identity and feign civility with the bandits. After gaining their trust, He could plan a later plan and contact the Feng family. Where are you taking me in Langjun? The errand boy shrank his head in fear like a quail, but he still plucked up the courage to ask the bandits why they were here. The bandits snorted coldly, picked up the collar of the boy's servant, and dragged him away. One of the bandits asked Feng Ju with his eyes. Feng Ju's expression froze, and he waved his hand. No, I have my own legs. Third Lang of the Feng family would definitely not embarrass the Feng family. Feng Ju went to see the bandit leader with this idea. Where was the bandit leader? Feng Ju stood in the huge hall. The main seat was draped with a neat tiger skin, and the woman who sat in the indifferent posture was sitting there. The woman's expression was cold and unruly, and there was a cute big cat, but lying on her lap that everyone wanted to hug, kiss, and scratch. It was obviously a tiger. The tiger, the king of all beasts, was lying on the woman's lap like a cat, and from time to time, it let out comfortable and coquettish snores. There was no doubt that the bandit leader Feng Ju wanted to see was none other than this woman. What's your name? The woman was too lazy to lift her eyelids, and her slender fingers moved through the tiger's fur. Feng Ju thought of something and bowed respectfully. I'm Feng San. Feng San. The woman smiled lazily. She rubbed her bare feet on the tiger's belly, and the obedient tiger rubbed its big furry face on her knee. This scene was really harmonious and beautiful. What the hell? Feng Ju did not think that this tiger was kind and cute. There was still raw meat hanging from the corner of its mouth. Are you really called Feng San? What kind of parents would give their son such a name? Feng Ju lied through his teeth. My family is poor. Although my parents want to support my third son to study, their ability is limited after all. Third son? You have an elder brother besides you in your family? Feng Ju said. Yes, the eldest brother is Feng Da, the second brother is Feng Er, and I'm the third. Naturally, I'm Feng San. When he lowered his head, he did not notice a hint of a smile flashing across the woman's eyes. That smile was not a kind smile, but a blatant mockery. It was true that Feng Ju's acting skills were passable, but the boy servant beside him was not. Did he not see that the boy servant's expression was full of flaws? Feng Ju was lying. However, the name Feng San was simple and crude. It was probably similar to the pronunciation of the family's San Langjun, right? The woman did not pursue the matter, and only said, Your family is poor? Then I can't let you live. Drag him down and chop him up to feed him. That way we can save some meat. Chop him up to feed who? Just look at the excited look on the tiger's face as it crouched beside the woman. The boy servant was so scared that he fainted. Feng Ju did not look too good either. He tried his best to fight for the possibility of survival. For example, although his family was poor, he was good at reading and was knowledgeable. Unfortunately, he was born into a poor family, so he could not enter the officialdom to seek an official career. So if the woman let him live, he was willing to be the woman's inept advisor and help her manage the bandit stronghold. It was also a way out. The woman sneered. Do you want to be a bandit like me? Feng Ju said. There are 360 professions, and every profession is worth a try. So what if he was a bandit? Couldn't bandits have the ambition to improve themselves and work hard to expand their career? Professional discrimination was unacceptable. Feng Ju spoke with fervor and assurance again. The surrounding bandits who were listening were tempted, but the woman had the final say in the bandit stronghold. If she refused to agree, no matter how much the bandits valued Feng Ju's talent, Feng Ju could only be chopped up and fed to the tiger. After a while, the woman nodded and said, He's a little interesting. Keep him. Is the boy servant next to you? Feng Ju said, Yes. My family is poor, but it's still possible to buy a cheap boy servant. The woman said, Throw him into the backyard to clean and wash clothes. We're in need of a handyman. Thus, Feng Ju successfully transformed into Feng San and became the inept advisor of the bandit stronghold. He slowly gained the trust of the woman Jiang Pingji. Only then did he know that the seemingly ordinary stronghold actually had a wide range of businesses. Not only did they have a part-time job of robbing people, but they also worked as bodyguards to escort people. What if no one hired them? They could rob people and see if the merchants they stopped wanted to be robbed, or if they wanted to hire them as bodyguards. Feng Ju was dumbfounded by the bandits' actions. Isn't it not good to do this? The woman rolled her eyes. We are bandits. When have bandits ever been reasonable? Bandits were unreasonable, especially the bandit leader Jiang Pingji. Not only did she dare to rob rich people, but she also dared to rob the officials of Dongqing's government. She was simply lawless. Feng Ju complained in his heart, but in fact, he was taking the side of the evildoer. After a few months, Feng Ju was gradually brainwashed by the woman. He surprisingly agreed with all kinds of words she said. Every night, he told himself to calm down. But during the day, he followed the bandit leader everywhere to challenge and annex the surrounding bandit strongholds. For the sustainable development of the bandit stronghold, Feng Ju also worked day and night. As a genius advisor, Feng Ju was also keenly aware of the suspicious aspects of the bandit stronghold. The seemingly unreasonable bandit leader seemed to be secretly planning something. There was nothing to study about the other bandits, but the bandit leader was very suspicious. In order to solve this mystery, Feng Ju had several opportunities to leave the bandit stronghold, but he didn't. He continued to stay. One day, Feng Ju made great contributions in annexing the bandit stronghold. He arranged all kinds of personnel very well. The bandit stronghold held a celebration banquet. As the inept advisor, Feng Ju was also surrounded by the crowd and drank a lot of wine. As he drank, he got drunk. When Feng Ju was young, he didn't have a good alcohol tolerance. When he drank too much, his eyes were watery. His behavior was very different from usual. He was drunk and couldn't hold back the words in his heart. He boldly asked the doubts in his heart, but he found out Jiang Pingji's big plan. I want to overturn this world. The bandit leader, who was also drunk, climbed onto the roof. He held a wine pot in one hand and pointed at the full moon in the sky with the other. I want the sun and the moon to turn upside down. I want all living beings to surrender to me. Feng Ju crouched under the ladder with the wine pot in his arms and clapped for her. Sometimes he frowned and felt sad, until the sound of the bell rang faintly in his ears and woke him up from the dream. Why is it so noisy outside? Feng Ju opened his eyes. He, who had a gray beard and hair, had suffered a serious illness recently. His condition had only improved in the past few days. That was why he was dreaming about the interesting events of his youth. The bell outside had yet to stop. Feng Ju felt that it was very noisy. At this time, the filial son and grandson who were guarding outside said in a trembling voice, "The Emperor of Daxing." Feng Ju felt that something was wrong. "Who?" The eldest son said with a pale face. "The Emperor of Daxing passed away half an hour ago." Feng Ju sat on the bed. The string of beads in his hands scattered all over the ground. The person who had been companions for nearly 40 years left just like that? They met insignificant people and got to know each other by chance. Although it was absurd, it was still an interesting conversation between the ruler and the minister. The only flaw in this interesting conversation was that the ending was not what they were happy to see. The relationship between the ruler and the minister did not last to the end. Instead, it was alienation and indifference. "Father, please restrain your grief." Feng Ju was silent for a long time. From the first glimmer of dawn to the approaching dusk, he finally snapped out of his trance. His body stiffly picked up the scattered beads on the ground. "Come, change your clothes and enter the palace to see the former emperor." The former emperor had passed away. Even if the minister was too sick to get up, he still had to crawl over. Feng Ju didn't know that the new emperor, who had ascended the throne after being suppressed by the aristocrats, still had some affection for the Feng family. But he couldn't take the initiative to give them something to use against him. After all, the former emperor and the former emperor's daughter were different. "In the future, I'll have to make a living in the hands of your daughter." Chapter 1848. Feng Ju's most treasured xiangfei bamboo was planted in the courtyard. Every time the breeze blew, the bamboo leaves rustled. Rockery, flowing water, flowers, dense bamboo. It was a quiet and elegant scene. "I'm afraid you, Feng Huijia, are the only one who knows how to enjoy life in the Feng family. This is the wine you brewed yourself. The taste is indeed unique." The woman in a pine green dress casually leaned against the rockery by the pond. One of her feet was fiddling with the gravel, and the other was on the water surface. She reeked of alcohol, and her cheeks were flushed. Her right hand held a red rope, and the other end of the red rope was an empty jar of wine. Even drinking wine can't shut your mouth. You climbed over the wall and sneaked into the wine cellar. Not only did you drink for free, but you also complained that I'm idle. You're really hard to please. Fengju was also sitting not far away. He leaned against the table and held a jar of wine in his arms. With a look of disdain he said, "Remember to pay for the wine." The woman in the pine green dress revealed a drunken smile. She held her forehead with her hand and tucked her fingers between her fingers. Her long hair that was scattered on her forehead was pushed to the back of her head. She said lazily, "Although it's just a few jars of wine, it shouldn't be expensive. But I'm so poor that I can't afford to pay for the wine." Fengju was speechless. This was the first time he had seen someone drink wine so confidently and boldly. If it wasn't for the special status of the woman in the pine green dress, Fengju really wanted to call the servants over to beat her up and send her to the government. Smiley face. However, the government was run by her. His two brothers more or less earned a living under her, so Fengju could only tolerate it. Speaking of which, how did you think of learning how to brew wine? The woman in the pine green dress was also the ruler of this world, Jiang Pingji. Her misty eyes were still clear. She asked curiously. She didn't quite understand why Fengju refused to become an official. Instead, he became more and more playful. Fengjin complained to Jiang Pingji more than once that the naughty child's younger brother was troublesome. Fengju was a well-known eccentric scholar. He was uninhibited, loved freedom and courted death. She didn't see him write poems. Instead, he was interested in eating, drinking and having fun all day. A year ago, for the sake of a jar of fine wine presented by a small country outside the region, Fengju had purposely packed his wallet and left home with his servants. When Fengjin talked about this, his expression was complicated. Well, her brother was in his 40s, and he still ran away from home. She really didn't know what to say. A few days ago, Fengjin gave her a jar of wine brewed by Fengju. Although it wasn't strong, it was mellow and intoxicating. Jiang Pingji felt that one jar was not enough, so she climbed over the low wall of Fengju's house and stole his wine cellar. As the emperor, Jiang Pingji probably had more drinking buddies than confidants smiley face. Jiang Pingji had a high alcohol tolerance and visited the wine cellar many times. Fengju was naturally alarmed and specially came to catch the thief. The two of them bumped into each other, so they drank together. No matter how imaginative Fengju was, no matter how reckless he was, he never thought that the ruler of a country would steal someone else's wine cellar. I should be glad that this fellow is a woman and not a man. Otherwise, it would be so easy to sneak into a minister's backyard. Fengju couldn't help but complain. Jiang Pingji rocked back and forth with laughter. Her beautiful eyes were filled with a sly smile. You make it sound like there won't be a commotion in the minister's backyard, because I'm a woman. Fengju was speechless. Who gave her the courage to say that she wanted to be a minister in green so blatantly? Fengju said harshly. No wonder I noticed that the green clouds in the sky above the capital were thicker when I came back. Jiang Pingji supported her forehead with one hand and said with a smile. This also applies to your residence. Your wife is very interesting. Fengju, who had run away from home for a year, was speechless. He knew that Jiang Pingji's words were nonsense, but Fengju still couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. When he was angry, he took a sip of wine to drown his sorrows. Your wife is an ambitious woman. It's a pity that she's confined to the backyard. You've been away for a whole year. She's so bored that she wants to plant weeds in the backyard. She might as well use her connections to find a leisurely place. As her husband, don't you feel a little pressured? Fengju was speechless when he heard that. After thinking about it for a while, he understood that Jiang Pingji's purpose for coming today was not just to steal the wine cellar. There are so many people in this world who are willing to share your majesty's worries and burdens. What's so interesting about becoming one of them? Fengju said. What I've been pursuing all my life is to be different from the rest of the world. I want to do things that the rest of the world can't do. The Feng family had a second brother in the imperial court, and the eldest brother was in charge of the Feng family. I only need to enjoy myself while I can, so that I won't waste this lifetime of time. Why bother to tire yourself out? At first, Feng Ju thought that he would become an official after the Jiang dynasty was established. However, when he witnessed Jiang Pengji's ascension, Feng Ju felt that the blockage in his heart had finally been lifted. It was as if the knot in his heart for many years had finally been cured. He was the third son of the Feng family. Compared to the political affairs of the imperial court, he hoped to experience more interesting things that he had never experienced before. Every time Jiang Pengji heard him say this, she couldn't help but roll her eyes. If Huaiyu and the rest heard this, they'd probably go crazy with anger. From their point of view, Feng Ju was currently losing his ambition and wasting his talents. Feng Ju said, "What's there to be angry about? They're already in their 40s. What if something bad happens to them?" Jiang Pengji said, "You know that they're old, yet you still don't restrain yourself?" Feng Ju rested his chin on his hand and sighed. In one's life, it's not easy to have a chance to live for oneself, and to live the way one wants to live. Jiang Pengji smiled as she drank. "You've left for half your life, yet you're still young when you return? Your Majesty's words sound interesting." "That's exactly what you're saying." Feng Ju burped and said drunkenly, "I really have to thank my two brothers for helping me bear the burden, for being able to be willful and reckless in this life. They can't be willful, so I'll help them live that free and easy life." Jiang Pengji sneered. "Your words are getting more and more shameless. Do they still have to thank you?" Feng Ju blinked and said, "Even if my brothers came to thank me, how would I dare to accept it?" Jiang Pengji was speechless. Alright, he was indeed thick-skinned. He was very much to her liking. She didn't like to deal with old-fashioned people who were too serious. On the contrary, she admired those who were so unconventional and could play with them. Feng Ju talked about the scenery outside the region, the desert oasis, and the beasts in the dense forest. Jiang Pengji listened very seriously. These scenes should be common to her. But after she came to this world, she was trapped in a small place. The scenery that Feng Ju spoke of was distant, as if it was from her previous life. Oh no, it was her previous life. Jiang Pengji sneered and said, "You're making my heart itch with these words. If I were to be urged by you to abandon the court and run away from home impulsively, without a care for anything else," Feng Ju smiled and said, "In that case, I'll become a sinner for all eternity. I'll really be recorded in history." Jiang Pengji stopped smiling and twirled the red string with her fingers. "It's a good suggestion, but wait a little longer. When Leonor is 18 or 20, I'll let her travel the world. Remember to lead the way then." It seemed like a joke, but her eyes were full of seriousness. "Huaijia, you have to travel more, lest there's no one to introduce you to in the future." Feng Ju also said seriously, "Your Majesty is in the prime of your life. It's still too early to talk about abdicating." Jiang Pengji shook her head. "It's not early. The first half of my life, or rather most of it, will be left to others." The laws of Dongqing sounded nice, but when it came to actual implementation, they were bullsh*t. On the surface, the landowning households would be severely punished for accidentally killing poorer commoners, but in reality, they would only be fined some money. The gentry could use money to buy a person's life, but it was different for the commoners and commoners. Their crime of assaulting a landowning household was even more severe than the normal punishment. Even if Su Ku had killed a lowly servant, the noble from the aristocratic family would still make Su Ku pay with his life. The county governor said, "What's the point of telling me all this? Your student is too hot-tempered. To put it nicely, he would rather die in glory than live in dishonor. To put it bluntly, he has no schemes at all. He is jade. And that servant is not even worthy of being called a tile." It was only because they were familiar with each other that the county governor told Su Ku these things. Otherwise, he would have chased Su Ku out of anger. After a long while, his teacher asked, "Is Xiaoyu's life in danger?" The county governor said, "That family wanted Su Xiaoyu dead, but if you do something about it, he will probably be exiled." His teacher had been busy making arrangements for Su Ku, but in the end, He was still banished to a lowly servant, and was branded as a punishment for 30 years. Although the county governor took care of him, Su-ku, who was taken out of prison, was still extremely skinny. I will never forget the kindness of teaching and saving my life. It is a long journey, and my unfilial disciple will not be able to serve me. Please take care of yourself, teacher. Dressed in prison clothes, Su-ku's face was no longer as relaxed and cheerful as it was a few months ago. His brows were full of darkness, and his eyes were cold. His teacher sent Su-ku off. In the end, he sighed and handed the prepared luggage to Su-ku. I have arranged everything. You take good care of yourself. Su-ku took it, but he was not very optimistic. If his teacher could help him, that family could also send someone to do the same to Su-ku secretly. He was in a mess, and wearing broken straw sandals, he was forced to embark on the road of exile. Just as Su-ku had expected, he was sold to a broker house as soon as he left Zisong County. He was sold with a straw tag. If I can rise to the top one day, those who bully me, humiliate me, and hate me should all die. The pain of losing his mother and the disaster of being imprisoned made him grow rapidly in a short period of a year. Even though the tattoo on his face had festered, and he had a high fever for several days in the hot summer, he stubbornly survived. His mother had passed away, but his aunt was still alive. How could he die so easily and make his enemies happy? After being sold, Su-ku became a vegetable washing worker in the backyard of an aristocratic family. Under his careful planning, Su-ku, who was diligent and intelligent, successfully caught the eye of the kitchen supervisor. In addition, he was literate. Step by step, he became the confidant of the young supervisor in the accounting room. In the spring of the second year, the turning point finally came. Su-ku, as the dowry of the noble lady of the aristocratic family, entered another family. This family was also one of the aristocratic families in Dongqing. The marriage between the two families was a strong alliance. Su-ku relied on his own ability to climb a little further. He kicked away the young supervisor and successfully caught the eye of the male master. Don't misunderstand. It was not because of his appearance that the male master was interested in, but because Su-ku discovered the hidden ambition under his elegant appearance. Even though the man was not a good person, he was grateful to him for recognizing his worth and saving him from a dangerous situation. With his help, Su-ku got rid of his lowly status and brought over his widowed aunt from Zisong County. To these people, it was just a small effort, but to Su-ku, it was a reversal of fate and a turning point. After that, Dongqing was in chaos. The male master that Su-ku worked for took advantage of the situation and became one of the famous feudal lords in the chaotic world. Su-ku also took advantage of the situation to take revenge. He let the soldiers rush into the aristocratic family in Zisong County. Before exterminating the whole family, he let them taste the greatest humiliation before they died. The situation in the chaotic world was ever-changing. One day, they might be dancing and singing, but the next day, they might be beheaded and hung for humiliation. Su-ku, who had become a prisoner, looked at the hanging corpse of his old master. His dark eyes were calm, and he surrendered to the new master without saying a word. There were also colleagues who would rather die than surrender. They cursed Su-ku for forgetting his morals at the sight of profit, completely forgetting who raised him. The previous master must have been blind to trust such a traitorous ingrate like you. Su-ku had a rebellious streak in his brain. His straightforward action of defecting to the new master seemed to prove this point. A traitorous villain was not to be trusted, Su-ku said coldly. It's useless to say more. Another 2 years later, Su-ku relied on his outstanding ability to gain the trust of the new master, Jiang Pingji. She entrusted him with important tasks. Su-ku did not let down Jiang Pingji's trust in him. He took care of everything properly. Su Xiaoyu, I advise you. One day after the celebration banquet, Su-ku met Feng Ju, who reeked of alcohol. When they passed each other, he heard the latter muttering. What do you mean? Su-ku stopped in his tracks and looked at Feng Ju calmly. If Xiaoyu has done anything wrong, please don't hesitate to enlighten me. At that moment, when the night wind blew, Feng Ju shivered and sobered up a little. No, nothing. Feng Ju acted like he was in pain. He waved his hands and left. Suka's heart sank slightly, but he did not give up his plan because of this. In order to avenge the previous master, he had been planning for a long time. He absolutely could not give up halfway at this time. Suku admitted that Jiang Pingji was much better as a lord than the previous master. But so what? The person who saved him from the swamp was the previous master. That day, Suku promised the heavens that he would remain loyal for the rest of his life. For him, there was no right or wrong in this matter. There was only the difference between what should be done and what should not be done. Suku made use of Jiang Pingji's trust in him to tamper with the military reports and misrepresent the military situation. Not only did he secretly collude with the ambitious surrendered generals to rebel, but he also lured Jiang Pingji to lead her troops deep into the enemy's encirclement. He also took advantage of the situation to cut off Jiang Pingji's supply of military rations and any escape route. When Jiang Pingji's confidants realized that something was wrong, the best time to rescue them had long passed. Qiguan Rang waved his feather fan and said calmly, "She treats you well." Suku used all the spies he had plotted for years. He did not intend to leave a way out for himself. When he was captured by Qiguan Rang and his men, he was prepared to die. However, before he died, there was still Jiang Pingji on the road to hell. He did not lose out. So what if she treats me well? I'd rather use these treats in exchange for my lord's life and the safety of my family, Suku said. Besides, TSK, if it weren't for your stupidity, your bravery and your arrogance, you wouldn't have taken so long to realize that something was wrong. After a day and a night, Livermore disappeared. Suku still remembered the death of his old lord. Jiang Pingji was ruthless. His old lord was hung on the city wall as a warning to the public. His family members, old and young, also fled. None of them survived. Qiguan Rang said, "Why are you so stubborn? The lord you mentioned wasn't a wise lord. It doesn't matter if he died earlier or later. It's just a different time. Even if he didn't die in the hands of the lord, he would die in the hands of others. You're smart, how could you not see through it? But he was personally killed by Jiang Pingji. The hypothesis you mentioned doesn't exist." Suku sneered. It doesn't matter if Jiang Pingji is a wise lord, or if my lord is only ambitious but not capable. What does that have to do with me? I've never cared about the lives and deaths of the people in this world. You have a noble aspiration to save the common people and end the chaotic world. But Suku, I'm just a villain through and through. I don't see justice in black and white. He was tired of the so-called law. The world was chaotic and messy. If Jiang Pingji was changed, she would just be repeating the old path of the predecessors. Would she bring justice to the people? Could she make the law treat everyone equally? Don't joke with me. From the beginning to the end, Suku only wanted this person's life, to avenge the death of his old lord. There was no other nonsense to say. Qiguan Rang sighed. If that's the case, there's nothing else to say. Su Xiaoyu, have a safe journey. Consider it a token of my gratitude for working with you for the past 2 years. For the sake of these sentiments, he would let Suku die with dignity. Suku felt that something was wrong. Jiang Pingji was killed. Why are you indifferent? Qiguan Rang said. My lord has clear eyes and a clear heart. She's the best at seeing through people's hearts. How could she not see whether you're sincere or not? Suku's heart sank. She didn't fall for it. Qiguan Rang said. She fell for it. She did it on purpose. She just beat her at her own game. At most she was in a sorry state. Her heart was hurt a little. Qiguan Rang believed that at some point, his lord really trusted Suku. She even gave him a chance. If Suku gave up on the plan, this matter would be over. Unfortunately, Suku didn't. It gave Jiang Pingji a chance to clean up the disloyal people in her camp. Cleaning up a group of people would be considered as getting rid of the weeds and keeping the gold. Suku sneered. There are 7,000 enemy troops in ambush. She has no chance of survival. Jin Qichuan, whom he had carefully chosen, would be her burial ground. At that moment, a low sound of armor clashing came from outside the tent. There were familiar footsteps and a familiar cold voice. Xiaoyu, I'm really disappointed. Not only did I survive, but I'm also unscathed. The tent was lifted, and a person covered in blood came in. The straw sandals under her feet had sucked a lot of blood. Every footprint was stained with blood. Suka looked at her without saying a word. Chiguan Rang bowed and retreated to the side. With a swoosh, a long sword was unsheathed. The snow-white blade was stained with dried blood. It was directly pressed against Suka's throat. I've seen your choice. I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Jiang Pingji's face was also covered in blood. Most of the sticky red blood had dried up, but there was still some hanging on her face, covering her expression. Only her cold and murderous eyes could be seen clearly. Su Xiaoyu, I hate betrayers the most. Those who betray me, regardless of their status or achievements. In front of me, only death awaits them. Not long ago, Chiguan Rang pleaded for mercy in front of Jiang Pingji, but she rejected him. Wanzheng betrayal is betrayal. When he did it, he was already a dead man. Of course, Chiguan Rang's plea was not useless. Originally, Jiang Pingji wanted Su Ke to suffer the death penalty of 1,000 cuts. Chapter 1850. As the saying goes, if you get a good ID, you'll be spammed all the time. Suka didn't expect that his random ID would be spammed every day by idiotic netizens. Just as my 2 to 3 years with Emperor Chen was a hit, Suka's ID became a hot topic. Every day his colleagues would chat about him. Chiguan Rang whispered to him, "Brother, we're fated. Why don't we join the group?" Everyone in the group was talented. Whispered to Chiguan Rang, "I'm not going. I told you I'm not cosplaying. That's my real name." Chiguan Rang whispered to him, "Ugh, I feel sorry for you. But did your parents really not hate you for giving you this name?" Whispered to Chiguan Rang, "There are thousands of people named Suko in the country. It can't be that every parent has a grudge against their child." Who knew that an unknown person in history would become the male lead of a one-unit drama? Suko was a famous person that everyone who knew about the history of the Jiang dynasty knew. In reality, there weren't many documents about him. History books only recorded his birth and death years, a brief description of his short life, and the famous hanging corpse incident. Regardless of whether it was official or unofficial history, Suka's records weren't very long. Usually, Suka was mentioned for only one reason: to criticize how vengeful and violent Emperor Chen was. That was the Suka of history. Now Suka was just an ordinary student at Tianhua University. At most, he was the top scorer in the provincial examinations. Why did his parents give him such a name? According to the monk, it seemed that it was because his fate was relatively light. Before he entered high school, Suka didn't think there was anything wrong with his name. It wasn't until he studied the history of the Jiang dynasty in his first year of high school that Suka became famous smiley face, angle, from his first year of high school to his second year. Suka wasn't willing to tell people his name. However, after my 2 to 3 years with Emperor Chen was broadcasted, the low-key Suka suddenly became famous. Not only in real life, but also on the internet. My 2 to 3 years with Emperor Chen was a well-crafted one-unit drama. It mainly focused on the interactions between the male and female leads of each unit, and then pieced together the life of the first female emperor of the Jiang dynasty. Of course, the so-called male lead did not mean that he and the female lead had romantic feelings. In fact, this drama was excessively clean, and there was not a single hint of ambiguity between a man and a woman. The so-called male protagonist of a unit was merely the male character, who had the most scenes in the corresponding unit. Up until now, the show had already had 2 male leads, and it was currently serialized in the Dreamy chapter. As one of the most popular dramas in the summer, the royal family had recommended it, and it immediately exploded on the internet. Unfortunately, Suka had become the fish in the moat. He looked at the wave after wave of family recognition and sympathy on the private chat interface. There were even people who maliciously asked him about his experience of being left to dry for 30 years. Bah, he was still a 23-year-old young man. How could he have been left to dry for 30 years? He clicked on the top right corner of the mouse and closed the game. I really don't understand. What right does a nobody with less than 100 words in history have to be the male lead of a popular national drama? Suka sat on the upper bunk and angrily unlocked his phone. He logged into the membership app and scrolled to the latest episode of My 2 to 3 Years with Emperor Chen. He said to his roommate, I heard that the royal family released a batch of historical documents. What does it have to do with Suke? What does it have to do with me? His roommate said. I don't know about that. I heard it from old Nye. The old Nye his roommate mentioned was called Nye Guangshan. He was also an unlucky person who had clashed with a famous historical figure. But Nye Guangshan was much better than Suke. At the very least, he had clashed with a genius from Zhongzhou, while Suke had clashed with an unlucky person who had been left to dry for 30 years. Suke said, could it be that the historical documents released by the royal family have a lot of records of Suke? His roommate replied without looking up, I heard so. I heard that the scriptwriter of my 2 to 3 years with Emperor Chen used many connections to move the royal family in order to have enough material to recreate historical figures. Isn't the official Weibo of the royal family the Xinxiang faction? Before the broadcast, he arrogantly said that he didn't want to watch it. But after the broadcast, he kept saying that it smelled good and Weibo 3 meals a day? Suke's third appearance must have some unknown secrets. The official history of the Jiang dynasty had only appeared in about 100 words, but he was qualified to have a place in a drama. There was a lot going on behind the scenes. Suke calmed down upon hearing this and tapped on the first episode of Dreamy Chapter. By the time he saw the latest episode, the sky outside had already darkened. His roommate finally finished playing the game. Without looking up, he said, Old Sue, remember to bring me some takeout when you come back. Suke held his phone and didn't move. His roommate said again, the dormitory is so dark. Old Sue, please light the lights before you leave. Suke still didn't move. Old Sue, you're leaving? His roommate looked up and realized that Suke didn't look too good. Old Sue, are you okay? The sky was dark, but it hadn't completely sunk yet. His roommate could see the dense sweat on Suke's forehead. Suke then came back to his senses and was shocked to find that his forehead was covered in sweat. Me? I'm fine. I'm just a little obsessed with the drama. His roommate said, You're watching my 2 to 3 years with Emperor Chen? I heard from the netizens that Dreamy Chapter is quite cruel. Watching it once is like being stabbed by a knife. I remember that before the broadcast, there was an editor wearing a sock jacket who said that every episode was cruel. I didn't dare to watch it at first. Suke said casually, History isn't perfect to begin with. How can you expect the officials to give out sweets? Although Dreamy Chapter was only 2/3 of the way through, according to the historical context, the plot would become more and more cruel. His roommate said, I don't expect the officials to give out sweets. I just hope that it doesn't rain knives. The last unit tortured me so much that my heart and lungs were hurting. It wasn't easy to get sweets these days. Even though he knew that there was poison in the sugar, there was sh*T in the poison, and there were knives in the sh*T. He still had to carefully lick the sugar coating clean. Even if it was a rain of knives, he still had to lick out the taste of the sugar. Suke didn't say anything. Was it so cruel that it made his heart hurt? Suke didn't feel that it was cruel. Instead, he felt that something was stuck in his heart and throat, making him feel inexplicably uncomfortable. Looking at the entanglement of the male and female protagonists on the screen, it was as if he had been pulled into it and experienced it himself. His roommate climbed out of bed and turned on the lights. Seeing Suke's pale face, he quickly asked Suke if he wanted to go to the hospital. I'm fine. I just feel a little uncomfortable. Old Sue, how can you call that fine? Suke was dragged to the hospital by his roommate for a checkup. The results showed that everything was fine. On the way back to the dormitory, Suke said, I told you that I'm in good health. I just had a full body checkup a few days ago. His roommate said, You can't blame me. If not for your pale face, I would have been shocked. When they returned to the dormitory, another roommate, Nye Guangshan, was browsing Weibo on his phone. What's wrong with old Sue? Nye Guangshan looked concerned. Suke shook his head and didn't say anything. His roommate said, Old Sue suddenly looked very pale. I accompanied him to the hospital for a checkup. What did the checkup find? His roommate said, Nothing. He's strong and lively. He's probably too engrossed in watching a television series. Nye Guangshan seemed to have known about it. 2 years between me and Empress Chen. Suka felt a little embarrassed. He was so engrossed in watching a television series that he really thought he was a character in the series. Nie Guangshan looked at Suka from head to toe and sighed. It's your birthday in a few days. You have a 3-day holiday. Do you want to go out and relax? His birthday was the birthday of the current Empress, and the whole nation had a 3-day holiday. This custom had been carried on since the early years of the Jiang dynasty. A group of netizens joked that it was one of the greatest contributions of the Jiang dynasty. Suka asked, "Where are we going?" Nie Guangshan said, "Suka's tomb in Jinqichuan." His roommate almost choked on his saliva. "Old Nie, are you crazy? Colliding with a historical figure was bad enough." Nie Guangshan, this old fox, was still encouraging Suka to visit the ruins of the human cemetery. See what? See how that place exposed a corpse to the sun for 30 years? Nie Guangshan rolled his eyes and said, "Just tell me, are you going or not?" Suka said, "Yes." His roommate shook his head helplessly. "Both of you are crazy. What's there to see in a cemetery?" Nie Guangshan said, "I received some vague information from my mentor. The imperial family seems to have donated a cultural relic to the Suku Memorial Hall." His roommate was shocked. The imperial family will take the initiative to donate a cultural relic? Did the sun rise from the west? Anyone with a bit of historical knowledge would know that the Jiang dynasty's imperial family was one of the weirder ones in history. The imperial family advocated frugality and had simple funerals. Before Emperor Chen died, he told young Emperor Jiang Yan that no living person, jade, gold, silver, copper, or iron should be buried with him. This became a custom passed down through the generations of the Jiang dynasty's emperors. Every generation's imperial mausoleum was as clean as if it had been raided by thieves. According to historical records, the most extravagant emperor was Jiang Renzong. He had 2 more gold medallions than his ancestors. These 2 gold medallions were obtained after Jiang Renzong fought hard with the imperial family and the ministers. _ smiley face. Angle. _ even the burial was so simple, let alone the daily savings. The only thing that could be considered rich was probably the various historical records, or the calligraphy and collections of the previous emperors. However, these things were the private property of the imperial family. If they were not willing to take them out, the outside world could not force them. For so many years, they had never heard of the imperial family taking anything from the outside, let alone donating cultural relics. Just for this reason alone, they had to go and take a look. Due to the broadcast of the popular national drama, My 2 Years with Emperor Chen, the search for the famous historical figure Suku had skyrocketed. Even his memorial was flooded with visitors. People came not only to join in the fun, but also to see the cultural relics donated by the imperial family. The memorial was not big, and there were not many things on display. The only pictures and photos were still from the hit shows. His roommate said in boredom, "There's nothing to see." Nie Guangshan did not speak. Chapter 1851. Xiaoyu, have you encountered any difficulties recently? After the court session ended, Jiang Pingji discussed trivial matters with the ministers. When everyone dispersed, she asked Suku to stay for a private conversation. Suku looked puzzled. "I have nothing important recently. Your Majesty suddenly asked about this." "I'm confused." Jiang Pingji pointed at the few memorials piled on the desk and said to Suku with a heavy expression, "These memorials are all against you." At a rough glance, there were at least a dozen books. Suku was a low-key official. Although he was one of the most important officials, he rarely caused trouble. The imperial censor couldn't find anything to use against him even if they wanted to, unlike Feng Zhen, who had an average of more than 20 books every month for the past year. If it wasn't for problems with his speech, then it was for his behavior. If it wasn't for the fact that he had too many problems with government affairs, Feng Zhen was covered in lice. Suku had always been the imperial censor's forbidden area. They wouldn't be able to pick out any mistakes even if they stayed there for half a year. The contents of the memorials were very uniform. They were roughly divided into 2 types. One type said that Suku didn't go home after work and wandered around. This was not the role model a good official should have. One said that Suku had a mistress outside, even though he hadn't taken a concubine, which seriously damaged the positive image of the court in the new era. As the saying goes, cultivate one's moral character, govern one's family, govern one's country, and bring peace to the world. They felt that Suku should be punished for having a mistress outside, when he didn't even figure out his own affairs. Jiang Pingji was dumbfounded. She didn't know if it was because the political situation was too stable, or because everyone had nothing better to do. But the imperial censors were gossiping like paparazzi. Although it was their duty, Jiang Pingji felt helpless every time she saw trivial gossip piled up on her desk. She gave the imperial censors a lot of power to speak, and allowed them to participate in memorials to the emperor and the people. This was so that they could be the supervisory body of the court, and constantly remind the emperor and the officials to pay attention to their words and morals. But as time went by, the style seemed to have changed. Of course, this wasn't the point. The imperial censors' enthusiasm couldn't be dampened. Jiang Pingji could only swallow 10,000 curses in her heart. The most important thing was that the person who was implicated was Suku. Considering the years of trust between the emperor and the minister, Jiang Pingji didn't publish it for the time being. She planned to find the person involved to understand the situation. Not only was Suku an important minister, but he was also an old minister. He had to maintain his dignity, and Jiang Pingji could not disregard his dignity just because of a trivial matter. That was why the scene above happened. Suku looked at the pile of memorials and realized the severity of the situation. Jiang Pingji said, "The imperial censor wouldn't make things up, but I didn't completely believe it. There must be a reason for this, so I came to ask you about it." Suku sighed. "This is my fault. I didn't handle my family affairs well, and let them taint your majesty's ears." Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows. Her eyes were filled with unfriendliness. "Did you really have an affair like what the memorials said? Did you come here to make trouble?" "Wait a minute." It was as if they were not talking about the same thing. Suku asked, "What mistress? What did these imperial censors report to him?" Jiang Pingji briefly explained it, and Suku was almost frightened by the imperial censors' logic. "Xiaoyu, although Xuanmei is no longer young, she is still your wife who has accompanied you for many years. She takes care of your aunt, takes care of your children, and takes care of everything in the mansion, so that you don't have to worry about anything. She has given birth to your children. She didn't complain when you were away for so many years. Even if she doesn't have any merits, she has worked hard. If you really had an affair behind her back, wouldn't that make her lose face?" Jiang Pingji seriously criticized and educated Suku. In the early days of the Jiang dynasty, the marriage laws were also further divided and adjusted. Men could have concubines as long as they met the requirements. Their ancestors had a powerful background, or they themselves were powerful, or their wives were infertile. Men could have a concubine when they were over 30 years old, but the requirements were still relatively stringent. Suku had the right to have a concubine, but he didn't bring her home. Instead, he hid it, and in the end, the mistress came to make trouble. This hurt Xuanmei twice. If word got out, not only would people say that Suku was unscrupulous, but they would also say that Xuanmei was not good at all, and that her usual attitude was fake. If it was light, people would gossip about her, and if it was heavy, her reputation would be ruined. Suku was not a muddle-headed person, but why did he make such a mistake on this matter? "Your Majesty, this matter? I am also wronged. There is no mistress or mistress, there is nothing." There was a rather strange phenomenon. It was hard to say for the officials outside, but the officials in the capital were more restrained and didn't have many concubines in their backyards. In the previous dynasty, it was common for an official to have 3 or 4 concubines, and there might be 6 or 7 who had no status to warm their feet. But now, firstly, the emperor was a female. Secondly, the marriage laws were more mature and detailed about concubines, so there were fewer loopholes to exploit. Most of the concubines in the backyards of the officials in the capital were there before the founding of the country. After the founding of the country, the number of concubines declined sharply. For senior and important officials like Suku, who had qualifications and lived in the heart of the emperor. Most of them only had one wife in their backyards. Of course, there was no lack of those who got rid of their old wives when they were in power. As a result, the old wife went to the imperial censor, and the ex-husband was fired. When Hanyu, the crazy man, revised the marriage laws, he emphasized one rule. Those who were first lowly and then noble were not allowed to marry. What did that mean? It meant that if a man was a poor man before he married his wife, he was not allowed to divorce his wife after he became rich, unless his wife committed a serious crime. Of course, when he revised the marriage laws for the third time, Hanyu added a few more words. Those who were first lowly and then noble were not allowed to marry. The reason for the revision was that there were scumbags among the female officials, and their husbands were too weak. Hanyu thought that the husband and wife should unite on this kind of issue. It was everyone's responsibility to protect the weak. Anyway, according to the newly revised marriage laws, Suka's behavior was against the law. Not only would he be fined, but he would also be demoted and forced to reflect on his mistakes. Jiang Pingji didn't fully believe what he said. Private friendship was private friendship. As a friend, Jiang Pingji naturally believed Suke. But as an emperor, she treated her officials fairly, and would not be partial to Suku or the imperial censor. Go ahead. Suke started to talk and poured out his grievances. Did those meddlesome imperial censors think that he was willing to get off work and not go home? He was forced to not go home. It was said that the mistress in the mansion was not a mistress, and the mistress was not a mistress. Then who is she? Suke said, she is the daughter of my aunt's widowed sister's eldest daughter. In terms of seniority, she is my distant niece. Jiang Pingji said, a cousin is a 3,000-mile relationship. Suke felt a little wronged after hearing her complaints. It was stressful for an official to have such a vexing emperor. How did your distant niece become your mistress? Suke sighed. The old lady in the mansion is old and likes to stay with the younger generation. She is soft-hearted and kind. She couldn't help but help when she saw this relative was living a miserable life. The old lady is kind-hearted, but I didn't expect her to be so ambitious. I guess she was blinded by the prosperity of the capital and had thoughts that she shouldn't have. Anyway, I can't drive her away for fear that she will make a fuss in front of the old lady. The old lady has been spoiled for so many years that she doesn't care about other people's business. I don't want to put her in a difficult position, so I have to move out for a few days. Suke's mother passed away when he was young. The only female elder who was close to him was his aunt. His aunt was also unfortunate. She lost her husband when she was young and had no children. She devoted her motherly love to Suke and treated him like her own child. His aunt was the old lady with the highest status in the mansion. Suke had always treated her like a filial son. After so many years, even if they weren't mother and son, they were more like mother and son. The old lady was old and didn't know how many more days she could enjoy in her later years. Seeing that the old lady had a poor relative, she wanted to help them. Suke naturally agreed and discussed with Xuanmei to bring them over. Speaking of which, his aunt's niece also had a hard life. She lost her husband when she was young and struggled to survive with her daughter alone. Her daughter also had a hard life. She married a gangster, and her husband was beaten to death by debt collectors. His aunt's niece was very insecure about everything she had. She always felt that her current wealth and glory were all because of Suke's aunt. Once the old lady passed away, she, her daughter, and her young granddaughter would definitely be driven away. Thus she had a crooked idea. She heard that the mistress of the mansion, Xuanmei, was a maidservant and looked down on her. Even a maidservant could become the wife of the current Minister of Revenue. It shouldn't be a problem for his daughter to be a concubine, right? After Suke got off work, he often saw his niece, who was extremely beautiful, casting flirtatious glances at him, both overtly and covertly. As a smart person, Suke understood. She wanted to seduce him. I'll hide outside for 2 days. Ask the old lady what's going on. If she still doesn't understand, send her out. This was what Suke discussed with his wife. Xuanmei said, you're not accepting them? Suke said, why should I accept them? It's not as simple as adding a pair of chopsticks to the house. The more people there are, the more trouble there will be. I'm already worried about the mother and daughter. If I accept them, won't the mansion be peaceful? If my children find out, how can I, as an old father, feel? For an ordinary man, taking in a concubine was like raising a pet and adding a pair of chopsticks. However, it wasn't that simple to carry it out. For example, one of the assistant ministers of the Ministry of Personnel had a falling out with his wife. In a fit of anger, the wife said that she only cared about the food, drinks, housing, and transportation of the family, and didn't care about the concubines or foot warmers. Feng Yi silently followed his younger brother out of the door. It was inconvenient for the son to be present when his father was being lectured by his wife. After all, his father was very prideful. Are you close to His Highness Yan? His younger brother nodded. It's a blessing to be valued by His Highness. Don't let your guard down. Feng Yi caressed her brother's head. My little brother is getting cuter and cuter. Asterisk. Feng Yi nodded and smiled innocently. First, set a small goal. For example, remember in 1 second, Booksellers Mobile. Taking concubines, no matter if they were cheap concubines, good concubines, noble concubines, or unnamed legal wives, either their ancestors or themselves had to be awesome. If they couldn't meet these 2 requirements, they could only take a concubine when they were over 30 years old, and their legal wife had no children. In the early years of the Jiang dynasty, surgical skills had developed quite well. There were also certain treatments for diseases such as smallpox, and the neonatal mortality rate was the lowest in history every year. As for these marriage laws, the ministers had no solid reason to oppose them. Of course, there were policies and countermeasures. There were still some men who wanted to touch young and beautiful girls, and they could only turn a blind eye to them. But if there were irrefutable evidence, such as sons and daughters of concubines, things would be different. To sum up, Han Yu was indeed the most unlikable minister with enemies everywhere. In sharp contrast to Han Yu's bad relationship with others, his wife Madame Tao was invincible in diplomacy. She was the leader in the circle of noble ladies in the capital. Han Yu was so busy that he couldn't go home for a few times a year, so it was inevitable that he neglected the family. His wife, Madame Tao, had some conflicts with him, but she was good at taking care of the family, so Han Yu was naturally at ease. After a few years, Han Yu's busy work came to an end. He was asked to stay in the hall by the emperor for a private talk. Let's not talk about official affairs today. Let's talk about the private affairs of the family. The emperor looked serious. Han Yu was confused. After all, a private talk in the hall was usually a benefit for officials who made mistakes. Please go ahead, Your Majesty. Jiang Pingji said. Yen'er is getting old. I'm going to find a study partner for her. Young friends can be her right-hand man in the future. I'm sure you're aware of this. I intend to let Wenbin's youngest son, Han Qi, study with Yen'er. But how do you teach your son? She said the first sentence with a kind face, but the last sentence was full of anger. Han Yu's heart skipped a beat. Today, I'm not talking to you as an emperor, but as a mother. Han Yu had been with Jiang Pingji for many years. He knew her temperament very well. As long as she didn't show any killing intent, it meant that the situation was serious, but it hadn't escalated to the level of political affairs. Since she said it was a private affair, it should be a private affair. Han Yu didn't know what happened, but he knew that he should apologize first. Jiang Pingji felt helpless and angry. She promoted Han Yu's youngest son, Han Qi, for Han Yu's sake. But this guy secretly humiliated Yen'er, and Yen'er heard it from the other side of the wall. She had never seen such a stupid person. He didn't even know how to be careful with his words in the palace. Hadn't he heard that walls have ears? When her daughter crossed out Han Qi's name, Jiang Pingji specifically asked. After all, promoting Han Qi was to show respect to his father Han Yu. Jiang Yin sneered. My background is not worthy of his nobility. Jiang Pingji was furious when she heard that. She sent someone to investigate, and found out that Han Qi was very serious when he entered the palace for the examination. But after the examination, he laughed privately with his peers and belittled Jiang Yan in a disdainful tone. Jiang Yan happened to come over to check on her future study partner. She heard the whole thing from the other side of the wall. Jiang Yan had excellent self-restraint. Although she was young, she didn't show her emotions. She removed Han Qi from the list without any nonsense. Jiang Pingji would promote Han Qi for Han Yu's sake, because the two of them had been rulers and ministers for many years. It was reasonable for her to take care of him. However, Jiang Yan was the only heir to the throne. Why would she give Han Qi face? Who was Han Qi anyway? Therefore, Jiang Pingji prepared for 2 days. She waited for Han Yu to finish his work before she asked him to stay in the hall for a private talk. How did she teach her son? Han Yu listened to Jiang Pingji, and his face turned pale. He directly knelt down and pretended to ask for forgiveness. He said that he would discipline his youngest son well when he returned, and then bring him to Jiang Yan to ask for forgiveness. If Han Qi really went too far, Han Yu would break his legs. Not long ago, Bai Yuexia broke her son Shiyu's legs with a rod, and she divorced her husband. Outsiders didn't know the reason, but Han Yu knew something. Bai Yuexia dragged her son out of the Golden Scale Academy and broke his legs. It was His Majesty's order. It was most likely that Shiryu had done something wrong that made His Majesty furious. At that time, Han Yu felt that Bai Yuexia did not teach her son well. Now it was his turn. Smiley face. Angle. What kind of sin did he commit? Jiang Pingji said. Han Qi's matter is still a small matter. Han Yu's face showed bitterness. That bastard disrespected the crown prince, and humiliated the crown prince and the emperor. That was still a small matter. Han Yu was anxious. He didn't know what was a big matter. Jiang Pingji said. Go back and inform your Yu family. Let them know that I know what they did in private. It should be said that Jiang Pingji had known it for a long time. Han Yu and Madame Tao of the Yu family had resumed their old business of selling illegal salt. Madame Tao quickly amassed wealth through the illegal salt business and occupied the people's land. After Jiang Pingji recruited Han Yu, she beat Madame Tao up. She cut off Madame Tao's illegal salt business and took away the people's land that they illegally occupied. Everything had been peaceful for many years. At first, Madame Tao was trembling with fear. She was afraid of Jiang Pingji's force and didn't dare to do anything. However, as Han Yu gained more power in the court, he could still be favored by the emperor by dissing the officials. Madame Tao began to get restless and began to resume her old business. Han Yu's face was so pale that ink could drip from it. Do you know when it started, Your Majesty? Jiang Pingji said. It has been a while, but I kept it a secret. Madame Tao is a clown, but I can't implicate you. Han Yu was hated by hundreds of officials, but he was still alive and kicking, because Jiang Pingji had been helping him behind his back. She even cleaned up other officials' dirty tricks when necessary. But Madame Tao was Han Yu's mother, so Jiang Pingji didn't have to be so polite. She took the initiative to reveal it to Han Yu. If Madame Tao made too much trouble, Jiang Pingji had to get rid of the tumor, even if it would slightly implicate Han Yu. Han Yu was her baby. Who was Madame Tao? I am ashamed, Jiang Pingji said. Let's not talk about it. You can leave now. It was destined to be a chaotic day. When Han Yu got home, he immediately punished Han Qi, who was usually spoiled, was beaten until he screamed in pain. Madame Tao didn't care about her manners as a noble lady. She almost ran to stop Han Yu. Han Wenbin, why did you beat my son? Han Yu said. He slandered the crown prince's background as a bandit, and said he was a lowly person. Did he say that? Han Qi's face changed. A guilty look flashed across his chubby and cute face. Han Run, the eldest son, said, Isn't it known to the whole world? As soon as he said that, his father, who had always been kind to him, slapped him for the first time. His face was tilted to one side. Is it because of you? Han Yu asked someone to catch Madame Tao. What a coincidence. Both of you are punished by the family discipline. It's time to teach them a lesson. Han Run retorted angrily. Teach what? I haven't been home for years. What can you teach me? Han Yu felt like he was struck by lightning. You are two unfilial sons. When did he not teach them? When Han Yu was at home, the two sons were the ones he cared about the most. Han Run was forced to kneel down, but he still didn't give in. he said angrily and resentfully. Unfilial sons? That's a good scolding. Do you know how much my brother and I have been implicated by you in the academy all these years? You have a good reputation outside. You have offended countless officials, and we have been bullied again and again in the academy. You don't even know this. Now you are disciplining me and my brother for not knowing our duty. Of course, Han Run was resentful. How much had he and his brother suffered in the Golden Scale Academy? His father was fearless in dissing the officials, but they were ridiculed by the children of the officials. Han Run was resentful. He also hated Jiang Pingji for entrusting his father with such an important task, but she had attracted so much hatred, which had implicated his brother. He was even angrier when he heard that his brother was going to be chosen as the study companion of the crown prince. Wasn't it enough that he and his brother were being hated by others? Now he was punishing his brother for the sake of the crown prince. Who did he think he was? Did he think he was the emperor? Han Yu looked at his son, who looked familiar but had a strange temperament. He was so angry that he almost fainted. Who taught you these words? At this time, Mrs. Tao waved away the people who were trying to stop her. She protected her baby son who was crying with snot and tears all over his face. I taught them personally. What? Are you going to punish me in front of the servants? Han Yu was so angry that he almost fainted. He couldn't even stand steadily. He was too tired from work and experienced such an exciting scene when he came home. He was already an Iron Man who didn't collapse. I will deal with you later. That day, the Han's mansion was in a mess. The imperial censor who heard the news did not go there. Why? The emperor was watching. Humph. Carrot? Han Yu interrupted Mrs. Tao's illicit salt business as soon as she tasted the sweetness. He had thought that this matter would end like this, but a year and a half later, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Tao colluded with the gentry to rebel. After investigation, it was found that Han Yu's wife, Mrs. Tao, was involved and played a very important role. She made great contributions to the rebellion. Not only that, Han Yu's eldest son, Han Run, and his second son, Han Qi, were also involved. Their crimes were unforgivable. Because of this, Han Yu's house was confiscated. The leader of the confiscation was Fu Wang. He used to be Han Yu's enemy, and they still didn't get along. If Han Yu was the leader of the civil officials, then Fu Wang was the leader of the generals, and he was the absolute leader. The two had been enemies for many years, and now it was finally over. The emperor has protected you for so many years, but you still made such a mistake. I really don't know what to say. Fu Wang led the team in person. Of course, he was ordered by Jiang Pingji not to be rude to the people of Han's mansion, especially Han Yu. Of course, Fu Wang couldn't be presumptuous with this order. But it was still okay to say a few words to get back at Han Yu. Han Yu, who was dressed in plain clothes, sneered indifferently. Han Yu has been loyal to the emperor all his life. How can he be compared to your good reputation as a minister of several families? You and I know very well whether there is a rebellion or not. Fu Wang was so angry that his face turned black. Damn it, Han Yu is such a bastard. That night, Jiang Pingji met Han Yu in person. Han Run and Han Qi will be sent to the frontier, and will never be able to return home. The Tao family will be executed. Han Yu asked, What about me? I never break my promise, Jiang Pingji said. I will never change my promise to you. Han Yu shook his head. Your Majesty, this is favoritism. If you are like this, what is the purpose of justice? Jiang Pingji said. But you are not involved in the rebellion. You don't deserve to die. Han Yu smiled and bowed to her. The most fortunate thing in my life is to meet your Majesty and gain your Majesty's trust. Jiang Pingji stood still and looked at Han Yu for a long time. Wenbin, Han Yu said, it is my fault that I failed to teach my children and restrain my relatives. I can't defend myself. He knew that Jiang Pingji wanted to protect him, but he also knew that she couldn't. Someone was trying to overthrow the country. Madame Tao and Han Yu's 3 closest people were involved. It was impossible for him to be innocent in the eyes of the outside world. If Han Yu was innocent, not only would the laws of the Jiang dynasty be ridiculed, but the emperor would also be criticized by the later generations. Apart from that, There were many people in the court who wanted him dead. The emperor could suppress those voices, but it was not good for the court in the long run. It was not a wise emperor's choice to lose the overall situation for one person. He wanted justice, but the person who should be the most impartial was favoritism. If the emperor really did that, he would be trampling on the path that Han Yu had been pursuing for half his life. Han Yu said, "It's getting late. Your Majesty has a court meeting tomorrow. Go back to the palace first. I have nothing to do here." Jiang Pingji looked at his face deeply. "Wenbin," Han Yu smiled. "I know what I am doing. Your Majesty, don't worry." Jiang Pingji went back to the palace. Han Yu looked at the empty mansion. He washed his face, combed his hair, and put on the grandest clothes. Looking at the old man in the mirror, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. His life was full of ups and downs. When he was young, he had a good life. Who would have thought that he would be involved in a disaster? His family was confiscated, and Han Yu fell from heaven to hell overnight. It was like a reincarnation that couldn't be broken. Decades later, the family that he had painstakingly maintained also ended up being confiscated and exterminated. It was like a joke. He couldn't tell if he should hate himself or others. He ground the ink for himself and wrote a long letter of confession with a brush. Han Yu knew very well that his reputation would be ruined if the confession was made public. He would be nailed to the pillar of shame and be reviled by the later generations. But it didn't matter. When I am dead, I don't care about the flood behind me. Han Yu laughed at himself. He took out a hidden gold ingot from his sleeve and swallowed it. When the sky was bright, his body was already cold when the servants found him. Another 10 years later, the new emperor ascended to the throne. He followed his mother's last wish and overturned the case for Han Yu. In this world, who else could he rely on more than his birth mother? After all, Han Chi was the flesh and blood she gave birth to after being pregnant for 10 months. Han Chi was not used to Madame Tao's kindness at first, but he did not refuse her kindness. It didn't take long for Madame Tao to reveal her true nature. She hoped that Han Chi could take care of her current husband's legitimate son. Of course, this legitimate son was not Madame Tao's biological son. It was the precious egg that her husband's predecessor gave birth to due to dystocia and bleeding. In terms of age, he was half a year older than Han Chi, and was even in the class next to Han Chi, a chubby and fierce-looking little fatty. Han Chi didn't like him, and didn't want to agree, but Madame Tao's words implied that Han Chi was inferior to her. She should take care of the little fatty, so that Madame Tao's position in the family could be stable. Han Chi's personality was soft while little fatty was arrogant. He was bullied to the point of tears. He told Madame Tao about his grievances, but Madame Tao told him to bear with it. This made Han Chi extremely sad. Because he loved to cry, his close friends of the same age called him Han Ernyang. Han Chi didn't like it, but didn't object. He turned around and gave them a nickname. The little fatty didn't know where he heard this from, but he actually laughed and wanted to take off Han Chi's pants to see if he had roots. If he had roots, why would he be called Han Ernyang? Han Chi broke free with grievances and ran to the rockery in the garden to cry. Then Qiguan Dalong, who was worried, came to find him. Qiguan Chong was furious when he heard this. Did that beast really do that and say that? Han Chi cried again. His eyes were as red as a rabbit's. Just you wait. I'll beat that bastard until his parents don't recognize him. Qiguan Chong's temperament was completely different from his father's. He was like a firecracker, exploding at the slightest touch. Although he exploded, this kid was also cunning. He didn't go to settle the score alone. He went to several different classes of different grades, and called more than 20 people to beat them up together. This matter became big. Not only were the school teachers alarmed, but the parents of several children also knew. So many people beating one person. Isn't it not good? Han Chi hid behind Qiguan Chong like a rabbit, and asked this person, who was more like an older brother than an older brother, "What are you afraid of? Don't you know that the law doesn't punish the masses?" Therefore Qiguan Chong, who said the law doesn't punish the masses, was whipped by his father with a rattan cane. The law doesn't punish the masses? You've grown up. Qiguan Rang held the cane and said, "Today, I'll let you know that the law doesn't punish the masses. The more than 20 children who participated in the fight were basically the children of high-ranking officials in the court. There were sons and daughters. She didn't know how Qi Guanchong did it. He actually knew these children. When he said that his brother was bullied, these children all ran over to help. When Qi Guanrang heard that the cause was his son, he gritted his teeth in anger. His son was indeed a source of trouble. He was born to cause trouble for him. What was even more surprising was that after the 20 children were severely punished, they didn't resent Qi Guanchong. Instead, they showed an attitude of brother, I'll bear the hardships with you and enjoy the blessings together. One by one, they silently accepted the punishment and limped home by their parents to continue to be punished. Han Qi was no exception. After all, he was the source of this vicious fight. However, Han Yu was a gentle man, and he especially doted on his youngest son. A gentle man wouldn't punish his son with violence. He had to understand clearly before deciding how to punish him. After listening to his youngest son's pitiful narration, Han Yu was silent. He and Madame Tao had been separated for many years, but Madame Tao was still influencing the family like a ghost. Father, Han Yu asked him, do you want a mother? Han Qi. After a while, Han Qi said in a low voice, yes, but having a stepmother meant having a stepfather. That's what they used to say. Han Yu said, I'll look around. If it's possible, I'll try to find a suitable one. He didn't have much hope for it. In this life, Han Yu was still the mascot who dissed the whole court. However, he was not only protected by Jiang Pingji, but also by Qi Guanrang, Wei Ci, and other important ministers. Most of the ministers in the Golden Scale Academy were also inextricably linked to him. Not to mention that Master Yuanjing had been teaching at the Golden Scale Academy for so many years. The new generation of students under his tutelage had also entered the official ranks one after another. As the third disciple of Master Yuanjing, Han Yu was in a sense the senior brother of the new generation. Han Yu had offended many people, but his background was strong enough. Even so, he was still not competitive in the marriage market. As a man in his 40s, he had 2 legitimate sons, 1 illegitimate son, and 1 illegitimate daughter. Except for Han Qi, the other 3 were all adults and were still practicing and serving as officials. If the second wife married into the family, she would basically be a housekeeper. Even if she had children, she wouldn't be able to compete with the first few. Those who were well-matched in terms of social status didn't like Han Yu. They were old and had children. Han Yu was worried about those who were from a lower social status. Han Yu had seen too many women in the inner house who did crazy things to fight for the family property. Therefore, the promise he made to Han Qi was basically a verbal promise. Han Qi didn't care about it. Han Yu didn't care either. He greeted the official media and forgot about it. When Han Yu crawled out of the pile of files and took some time to let the servants shave his face, the official media came to the door. The servant was shaving Han Yu's beard when the official media came. Why is the official media here? Run and the others are outside. The marriage is not urgent. She is still young. The servant had a strange look on his face. Master, the official media is looking for you. Han Yu. His brain, which had been overloaded for half a year, finally dug out relevant memories from the depths of his memory. Do you still remember this? The servant couldn't help but cry and laugh. Han Yu was a rich man. He was probably the most difficult matchmaker the official media had ever been. He didn't dare to push an unsuitable candidate to the front of the official media. The servant said, Master, it's rare that you have a day off today. Why don't you send him away? Han Yu also wanted to say yes, but the official media had been looking for him for half a year. It wasn't good to send him away. Let me see him. The official media bowed to Han Yu. After getting permission, he stood up and handed over the card and the picture of the candidate. Which family? Han Yu was a little curious. He also had some requirements for the target. It couldn't be a young and unmarried girl. He was over 40 years old. Why would an old man want to harm people? It would be best if the girl was educated and a widow. It would be best if she had a few children with her husband's family. Having children would mean having ties. She would treat Han Qi as her own. and Hanyu would also take care of her children. The relationship of exchanging benefits made him feel more at ease. Hanyu also knew how busy he was. He was young and had fantasies about love. It would be a sin for him to marry someone. It would be better to choose a partner to live with. The official media revealed the information of the girl, with a flattering smile. Hanyu happened to open the picture, and was so shocked that he almost tore it apart. What a joke! Hanyu threw the picture on the table like a scourge. He didn't even look at the basic information of the girl. He was too familiar with the girl in the picture. Miyu came to the capital to report on her work half a year ago. She was a strong and fierce woman. She was the inspector of Ning province. She came to report on her work this time with the intention of being promoted again. The official media had sent a picture of such a woman to him. What a joke! They had even greeted each other yesterday. The official media said, "Your Excellency's portrait was also sent to them. They liked it very much." It wasn't a one-sided choice. Miyu chose Hanyu first, and then the official media asked Hanyu for his opinion. Hanyu was speechless. He remembered that Miyu had a family. The official media said, "They have been separated for more than a year." Hanyu vaguely remembered that the news of Miyu's separation from her family had spread to the capital and caused quite a commotion. It seemed that the husband of the girl was still crying in front of her house and wanted to remarry. However, her heart was as hard as iron. The official media continued, "Your Excellencies are a match made in heaven." Hanyu waved his hand and signaled the official media to leave. A match made in heaven, my *SS. Listening to the official media, Miyu knew that it wasn't just a matter of a day or two. Then what was the meaning of little Chao's greeting yesterday, as if nothing had happened? After thinking about it, Hanyu decided to go and ask her personally. Miyu seemed to have expected it. "I've been waiting for you." Hanyu was almost choked. Miyu handed a piece of paper to Hanyu. "Your Excellency, please take a look at this before you say anything." Hanyu looked down, and his face almost cracked. "Your Excellency, please consider it. It's not a difficult request." Hanyu had a strange look on his face. Miyu said, "They have served me for many years. After so many years, we have developed a sisterly relationship. It's a waste of time to stay there, so I bought all their contracts of slavery. They will live a carefree life as long as I am alive in the future." Hanyu was speechless. Other people got married with gold, silver, and jewelry. When Miyu got married, she got married with her ex-husband's concubines. Yes, you read it right. She got married with her ex-husband's concubines. After Miyu divorced her ex-husband, she took away all the concubines of her ex-husband who were willing to leave. She even married them into her new husband's family. "Ridiculous," Miyu said. "Of course I won't make things difficult for your Excellency. Their daily necessities, food, clothing, and other expenses are all paid for by me. They won't appear in front of your Excellency after marriage. They will only say that they are my dowry. They won't taint the reputation of your house. If the two of them got married, they could live together if they liked it. If they didn't, they could live separately." Miyu was busy, so was Hanyu. No one could blame the other. Hanyu thought it was ridiculous. "Why?" Miyu smiled. She looked at Hanyu with undisguised ambition. "Your Excellency, don't you understand your own situation? You are extremely favored, but you are also extremely dangerous. I can help you and protect you. At the same time, I can borrow your power. This is supposed to be a mutually beneficial thing. Why don't you agree? I heard that the former madam of your house is not well behaved. If there is a proper mistress, she will think twice, right?" Hanyu was speechless. After a while, Hanyu said, "To be honest, according to the Ministry of Personnel, your promotion is a sure thing." Miyu said, "But it's not enough." "Not enough?" Hanyu said, "I can't help you with anything." He didn't think that Miyu was someone who needed to go through the back door. How long had it been since she became an official and became the inspector of Ningzhou? In just a few years, she had walked a path that others might not finish in a lifetime. "Of course I don't need your help. His Majesty trusts and values you, Han Wenbin. This is what I value," Miyu said and added, "As long as we are husband and wife in name, it will be enough. But whether it is in name or in reality, it depends on fate." Hanyu left with a gloomy face. At this time, a graceful woman walked out from behind the screen. The woman sat beside Miyu and massaged her shoulders. That Excellency doesn't look like he will agree. Miyu smiled and said, "Why not?" The woman was one of her ex-husband's concubines. She was also willing to redeem herself and leave with Miyu. "But look," Miyu said, "just wait. In a few days, His Majesty will come forward to make peace." The woman was surprised. "Why?" Miyu said, "He has made too many enemies. It seems that he has a strong background, but the wind in the court is always changing. Who knows if his classmates who were laughing with him a few days ago will become his enemy in a few days. How many people have been hurt by his reform of the law? Many people are thinking about him." The woman said, "Then His Majesty wants to make peace," Miyu said. "Of course, to protect this precious egg." As expected, Miyu would definitely rise to a high position. But she still felt that it was not enough. She really wanted to be at the top of the world. A small ninjo couldn't satisfy her ambition. The woman looked at Miyu and sighed. "But you don't have to get married," Miyu said. "Even if we get married, we can live our own lives. He is an excellent shield. So am I." She and Hanyu were not young people in their 20s. They knew what they wanted. "Do you think I am wronged?" In the eyes of ordinary people, marriage is a big event that will affect their whole life. But if I get married again, it will be my third marriage. When it came to getting married, it was a matter of familiarity the first time, familiarity the second, and familiarity the third. It doesn't matter whether we get married or not. What matters is how we live our lives. Miyu's effort was equal to her gain, so she didn't feel wronged. If the gain was greater than the effort, then it was a profit. The woman was not optimistic about it. A month later, an imperial edict was issued. She was dumbfounded. Hanyu's ex-wife, Mrs. Tao, and Miyu's ex-husband were also dumbfounded. All the civil and military officials in the court were also dumbfounded. Master Yuanjing went to visit his students at his old age. Hanyu was not worried as expected, nor was he happy to be a groom. Instead, he was very calm. "Things are not like what you are worried about, Master. I get along well with that person." It was not a lie. They really got along well. After a conversation, they found that many of their interests overlapped. It was not love between a man and a woman, but it was not a problem for them to live together. They were more like-minded friends than husband and wife. The two of them had indeed been friends for nearly 30 years. Hanyu's only grudge was the group of concubines in Miyu's backyard. "Are you raising concubines or daughters?" On Miyu's 50th birthday, Hanyu gave her concubines 16 gifts. However, at the birthday party, he found that all the women in Miyu's room were strangers. They were all gentle and sweet to her. She was living a better life than the emperor. "Did your majesty know?" Mikan said. "This old one likes to raise daughters. It's not like I've given you a single copper coin." Hanyu was speechless. Did he feed those 16 gifts to the dogs? Genius. 1 second to remember my address. Mobile version. Chapter 1854. The spring rain was so noisy that it was hard to fall asleep. Mika tossed and turned in bed from the second half of the night until dawn. She was a light sleeper and had many nightmares, so she woke up after an hour. "What time is it now?" The maid on night duty answered. "Madam, it's just past 7. "It's only 7? Hearing the way the maidservant addressed her, Mika suddenly remembered that she had spent the night in the Han Manor, so it could be considered as her home. The maid asked, "Madam, do you want to get up now?" Miko answered, "Yes." Maidservants came in one after another, helping Miyu wash her face, tidying up her hair, and even giving her an exquisite massage to relieve her headache. "Madam hasn't been sleeping well recently. Do you want a doctor to come and take a look?" Mika propped her elbows on the dressing table and pretended to sleep for a while to relax her tired mind. "No need. It's the same problem every year. I'll be fine after a few days." Mika was working in the capital now. She spent most of her time in her own residence, and only a few at the Han residence. Although she didn't stay much, the courtyard was still well equipped. It was bustling with people and didn't look cold at all. The maid tied her hair into a loose bun, so it wouldn't hurt her scalp. Her makeup was also much simpler than usual. She looked at the phoenix eyes in the mirror and asked in surprise, "Why is it so simple today?" If she remembered correctly, this maid was an expert in all kinds of makeup that was popular in the capital. Miku would sometimes complain about makeup that was too flashy. Even though she didn't look old, and looked to be in her early 30s, her makeup was too thick. Today was a rare day, the maidservant said. Yesterday old master reminded me that madam prefers a more simple and unadorned one these days. Miku was taken aback for a moment, then smiled and said, "As expected of the famous Han Wenbin, you are indeed meticulous in your actions." His success wasn't without reason. It could be seen from every little detail in his life. Every year, on this day, Michu's mood would become very gloomy, especially on this day, because it was the death anniversary of her first husband. After dressing up, Miku looked at the woman in the mirror, who looked to be in her late 20s, and felt a little better. "Madam, San Langjun heard that you were here, so he came to pay his respects." Mikan said, "Let him come." When she arrived at the main hall of the main courtyard, the young man who looked like a ball of childishness was waiting for her. "Your son pays his respects to mother," Mika said. "Rise. Is the academy's rest day today?" Han Chi stood up and sat on the seat to Michu's right, then said seriously, "Today, the academy will still have classes." Mikan frowned. "Class? This kid is skipping class? That shouldn't be the case." Han Chi was a rather well-behaved child, so well-behaved that he didn't have his own opinions. How could an obedient child do such a disgraceful thing like skipping class? Wasn't he afraid of being beaten up by his father? Han Chi said, "A few days ago, father applied for half a day of classes for me. He said it was to accompany mother." Michu. All right. She had to admit that there was indeed something praiseworthy about a person who was able to make it through the chaos of the world to where he was now and rise up step by step. In that case, Chi will accompany mother to Shangfu Temple on the outskirts of the capital today. Shangfu Temple was originally a temple in Hejian County, but His Majesty later allocated funds to build one in the outskirts of the capital. It was said that the old monk in the temple had taught His Majesty, even though His Majesty didn't believe in Buddhism, and had tried to curb the development of Buddhism, and was more inclined towards Taoism. It didn't affect the incense burning in Shangfu Temple. Michu also donated some money to the temple, and held a few water and land dharma meetings to pray for the dead. Nowadays, the world was peaceful, but there were always places where people had to be careful when they were outside. Han Chi brought enough guards, and went all the way from the inner city to Shangfu Temple on the outskirts of the capital. He didn't run into any trouble. Smiley face. Angle. No, he was in trouble. As the only child that Han Yu was still raising, Han Chi was truly isolated, and had no siblings to share the burden with him. When his parents wanted to teach him something, he could only bite the bullet and do it. For 4 hours, Michu didn't stop asking questions. At first, Han Chi was able to answer fluently, but the more he asked, the more anxious he became. His young and tender face was flushed with embarrassment. "It's so embarrassing, Pi Omega Pi," Michu laughed. "You are still young. This level is already something to be proud of." Han Chi stammered, "Mother, please comfort me. I understand." He realized that he was the only one in the family who didn't study well. Whether it was his brother Han Run, or his brother and sister, their grades in the Golden Scale Academy were all in the top 3 among the dozens of people in their classes. Han Chi was different. He was always in the bottom 50. He didn't inherit anything from his father except for his face. Not to mention his father and now his mother. If it were someone else with strong self-esteem, they would have been anxious to change their temperament. But Han Chi was still slow. Han Yu didn't force him like other parents. Or he was so busy with work that he didn't have the energy to be strict with his son. His son didn't become a playboy, which was the biggest contribution to the family. Michu said, "Being good-looking is also an advantage." Han Chi. Michu said, "If you have a bit more knowledge, with that face of yours and your family background, you should be able to become a famous scholar." Han Chi was speechless. He couldn't tell if his mother was praising or insulting him. Today wasn't a big festival, but there were still many tourists in the temple, and there were many carriages outside. Han Qi saw a familiar carriage in the parking lot and stopped in his tracks. Michu looked in the direction and found the family emblem on the carriage familiar. Wasn't that the family emblem of Han Yu's ex-wife who remarried? Mother? Michu was also aware of the resentment between Han Yu and his ex-wife. She frowned slightly, but her heart softened when she saw Han Qi's pitiful rabbit face. Let's go. Don't waste time. As soon as he entered the main hall of the Buddhist temple, he saw Han Yu's ex-wife leading a strange young lady. The four of them looked at each other. Michu didn't even move her eyes and walked straight over. Han Qi braced himself and saluted Madame Tao. Madame Tao accepted it with a stiff face, but her eyes were fixed on Michu's face, and she clenched the handkerchief in her hand. She snorted and ignored Han Qi. She was about to lead the strange young lady away. Michu reached out her hand and blocked her path. What are you doing? Madame Tao was so angry that her eyes were about to burst into flames. Things had changed with the passage of time. Now she valued other things more than what she used to hold on to. Without the power and status brought by Han Yu, without the protection and halo of the Tao family, she was just a weak and helpless woman. Now Michu jumped out and took everything she once didn't want. Michu opened the heavy and dazzling golden fan in her hand, the pendant of which was made from the finest jade of the world. She held the fan and covered half of her pretty face. She bowed to you. Madame Tao sneered. So what? He is my flesh and blood. He should bow to me. It's none of your business whether I accept it or not. She was Han Yu's first wife, and Michu was just his third wife. Why? Did she want to stop and bow to me? Unexpectedly, Michu smiled and said, I am a second-rank official in the imperial court. Can't a commoner bow to an official? Madame Tao. Han Qi, who was a little sad and wronged. Michu said, she should bow to you, and you should bow to me. Madam, you come from a noble family, and are well-educated and reasonable. How can you not know this? You don't have the title of honorary lady. Secondly, you don't have the title of honorary lady. Thirdly, your family was convicted by His Majesty as a traitor. If Qi ignored you, I wouldn't have recognized you. Since you've recognized Madam's identity, then the rules should be set. Madame Tao's face turned pale, as if it was covered with a layer of white ash. The young lady behind her was also scared and bowed to Michu first. After a while, Madame Tao bowed to Michu reluctantly and extremely humiliatingly. Get up. I am on leave today, so I can't show my authority. If the imperial censor finds out and reports it to His Majesty, it won't be good. Madame Tao gritted her teeth and her eyes were red. She pinched the young lady's wrist and dragged her away. Should she stay and be humiliated? Han Qi was dumbfounded. Michu said, she is your birth mother. She shouldn't be treated like this. However, I also can't bear the slightest grievance. She had seen many old foxes in the officialdom. Which one of them didn't have a complicated mind? How could she not see through Madame Tao's thoughts? She was just an ignorant and sad woman. Did she really think that the title of Li's first wife could suppress her? Not to mention actual actions, she couldn't even think about it. In the past, Michu wouldn't do this, but today was different. Today was the anniversary of her late husband's death. She didn't want him to see her being wronged. Han Qi lowered his head and said nothing. Michu offered incense and burned some Buddhist scriptures in the side hall. 2 hours passed in a flash. Before leaving the temple, Michu asked the Buddhist monk who cleaned the main hall. Only then did she know that the young lady beside Madame Tao was a concubine she arranged for her remarried husband. In order to win over her husband's heart and to stabilize her position as the first branch, she desperately hoped that the concubine she carefully selected could have a child as soon as possible. Today, she offered incense to pray for a child. The corners of Miyu's mouth twitched, and she couldn't help but retort, I can understand praying for good health. But what's wrong with going to a monastery to pray for children? Han Qi was puzzled. Why? Miyu said, don't you think it's ridiculous for a monk to say that the world is empty and seek a child from a monk? Han Qi. If the Buddha heard this, he would cry. Miku was very busy, But she was still better off than Hanyu. She had 3 days off every month. Out of respect for Hanyu, Mikin would occasionally ask about Han Chi's studies and care about his life in the academy. It was Han Chi's first time coming into contact with a woman like Michu, and he quickly felt closer to her than his birth mother, Madame Tao. Han Chi was sent back to the Han estate by the housekeeper. The woman who was massaging Miyu's shoulders said, "Third Langjun is not bad. He has a pure and kind nature." "What are you trying to say?" the woman said with a smile. "There's no harm in passing him over and putting him under your name. I'm sure the old master will agree." Mika played with the golden fan and said with a smile, "If we do that, Madame Tao will probably vomit blood from anger." The woman said gently, "Everyone has their own fate. This is her fate." To be able to forcefully turn a situation like this into the current situation was also a skill. She prided herself on being smart, but she never saw the truth in her life. Her fate had always been in the hands of others. It wasn't others who wanted to control her fate, but she took the initiative to give it to others. All honor and disgrace were tied to her family, her husband and her son. Her family was destroyed, her husband was divorced, and her son was estranged. She lost everything, but she still didn't wake up and continued to stubbornly step into the same pit. She wouldn't understand now, and she wouldn't understand why her life was like this in the future. Mika looked at the painting and inscription on the golden fan and said indifferently, "I only hope that there will be fewer women like her in the world." The woman said, "With Madame as a role model, why would those women not be moved?" Mika sneered, "You don't understand. There are always more people who sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor than those who do it themselves. So what if there was a role model? The current emperor was still a woman. As long as getting married and having children is still a way out for women, women like Madame Tao will still be endless." Mika sneered, "They will only say, 'This is a woman with a good life. It's a pity that she has been married 3 times. No matter how high the position and generous the salary is, it's not as good as them.' Then they will turn around and teach their daughters to work hard to marry better men, and teach their sons to study hard and practice martial arts, so that they won't be inferior to women. No one is a fool. Of course, they know that it's much easier to marry a man in a high position than to become a woman in a high position." The woman didn't understand. Many years later, Hanyu asked her if she wanted to be buried with her late husband. She was dying of old age. Mika smiled. "It's good to be a neighbor with an old man like you. Why bother the dead?" Hanyu sat beside the bed and asked her, "Are you relieved now? Things that I couldn't think through at 17 should be solved at 71. How can my state of mind be the same as now?" Her young man lived in her heart for nearly 50 years. She didn't have the passionate feelings and obsession of the past. Instead, she felt that he was an old friend who had left for a long time. She said hello and take care. She looked at the sunlight outside the window. Vaguely, he could hear a faint chuckle in his ears. Mika smiled. An old friend finally returned. Please remember the domain name of this book. Jiutian Shenhuang Mobile Version. Chapter 1855. Feng Zhen was nicknamed Prodigal Feng. His life philosophy was, joy should be enjoyed in time. How could it be delayed? This was a free and unruly wastrel, who was particular about carpe diem. Others laughed at him for being deviant and not knowing what etiquette was. He laughed at others for working hard all their lives and never having a day of true joy. Such a prodigal naturally couldn't be expected to live a 9-to-5 life. It was already good enough that he wasn't caught skipping work every day. However, the situation wasn't right in the past 2 days. Had Prodigal Feng been possessed by someone or something? He actually didn't leave early or arrive late. No, not only did he not leave early or arrive late, but he also arrived early and left late. His brows were full of nervousness and alertness, and his nerves were stretched taut. Could it be that the situation at the front line is tense? Even Prodigal Feng, who had always been unrestrained and calm, was so serious. Was it because the situation at the front line wasn't right? When Feng Zhen wasn't paying attention, such rumors quietly spread, causing many fence-sitters to panic. Finally, it reached the ears of the Lord Jiangpingji. She frowned. As the Lord, she was the clearest about the situation at the front line. The enemy couldn't withstand a single blow. The situation wasn't tense, and the provisions and logistics were in place. No matter how she looked at it, this battle was a sleeping victory. What was Feng Zhen up to all of a sudden, making everyone so restless? Seeing that the rumors were getting more and more exaggerated, Jiang Pingji couldn't help but grab Feng Zhen and ask him about it. Why haven't you been to New Lu recently to drink and watch dances? The lady boss of the tavern you frequent is still thinking about your money pouch. Feng Zhen. The two of them stared at each other. Feng Zhen suddenly revealed a little grievance that made one's heart ache. This time, it was Jiang Pingji's turn to be confused. She reflected on herself and didn't find any problems with her words. Did it agitate Feng Zhen? The person who went to New Lu all day to drink and watch dances was indeed Feng Zhen. The lady boss of the tavern was also concerned about his money pouch. He used to be radiant when he talked about these things. Why did he look as if he had offended an innocent woman? My lord, I'm afraid I won't be able to go again, Feng Zhen muttered. Please don't urge me to go again. As Feng Zhen's gang of scoundrels, it was perfectly normal for them to go to the women's den to drink and watch a dance together. However, without the tools to commit the crime, Jiang Pingji wouldn't stay there overnight. Ever since they got married, Feng Zhen's personality had changed. He only drank and didn't cross the line. For the two of them, going to New Lu to drink was not so much because they were greedy for the wine there, but because they were greedy for the colors there. Because of this, Feng Zhen was secretly scolded by many people. They said that he was a wastrel who had led the lord astray. Feng Zhen felt that he had been wronged. His lord was just an experienced driver who was familiar with the roads. Why would she need him to take her driving test? Jiang Pingji said, You've changed? Are you preparing to turn over a new leaf? Feng Zhen sighed. My wife is pregnant. The doctor said that her pulse is not very stable. Jiang Pingji understood. So that was why. If that was the reason, she could understand Feng Zhen's choice. It was fine if he wasn't serious normally, but he should pay attention to his wife's pregnancy. This was something he should do as a man. However, that's not right. If your wife is pregnant, then why have you been leaving early and returning late? I won't increase your salary even if you work a few more hours a day. It's better to finish what you're doing early and go home to accompany your wife. Jiang Pingji criticized Feng Zhen. Do you know how much of a joke you've made with your recent series of abnormal actions? Everyone thought that Feng Longzi was acting out of character because the front line was in a tight spot. There were so many people spreading rumors that even I almost believed them. When I investigated the source, it was actually you, Feng Zhen. How could she blame him for this? She was pushing the blame too far. Feng Zhen sighed. It's precisely because my wife is pregnant that I don't dare to go back. After thinking about it, I can only help my lord relieve her of her burdens. Jiang Pingji raised her hand to stop Feng Zhen from bewitching her. Out of 10 words that came out of Feng Longzi's mouth, 8 needed to be carefully considered to be true or false. The remaining 2 were false. Are you willing to be honest? Feng Zhen choked for a moment and said with grievance, It's true that my wife is pregnant that I don't dare to return to the manor. Jiang Pingji didn't quite understand. Feng Zhen was old, his knees were weak, and his body wasn't very healthy. His wife was pregnant after much difficulty, so he should be ecstatic. This was so abnormal. Could it be that the child belonged to old Wang next door? Jiang Pingji couldn't help but raise her eyebrows and recall which family lived next door to Feng Zhen's. Feng Zhen saw the slight change in her expression and knew that his lord was mistaken. He had to explain in a low voice. Before this, I had a son named Feng Yi. He was the son that my first wife gave birth to at the cost of her life. Yi has been intelligent and beautiful since he was young. His temperament is very similar to his mother's. Feng Zhen had a son before? Jiang Pingji was very surprised, because she didn't know about this before. Listening to Feng Zhen's tone, this child should have died young. It was indeed young, and the cause of death was related to Feng Zhen. That year, Feng Zhen was addicted to hanshi powder. The young Feng Yi didn't know the truth, and happened to see Feng Zhen after taking hanshi powder. He thought that something had happened to him, and hurriedly went to find the housekeeper to save Fengzhen, who knew that in early spring, the rain would be plentiful, and the moss would be lush. Little Fengyi accidentally slipped off the stone steps, and fell into the icy cold pond water. Although he was saved, he caught a serious cold that night and died of high fever. Fengzhen always thought that he was the cause of his son's death, and felt regret for many years. Sometimes, he would dream about this intelligent son in the middle of the night, and couldn't help but cry when he woke up. He gave up on the idea of having another child. And he was born weak and sickly, so he couldn't have one even if he wanted to. A while ago his wife, Wan Xiu'er, shyly and timidly told him that she was pregnant. Fengzhen felt his whole body go blank, as if a cold chill spread from the soles of his feet to his head. On the surface he was ecstatic, but in his heart, there was an uncontrollable panic and fear. Jiang Pingji was speechless. "Are you afraid that you'll be cuckolded?" As soon as she said this, the feelings that Fengzhen had been brewing were instantly broken. "What are you saying, my lord? My wife and I have a deep relationship. Why would I suspect this?" The sickly man wasn't someone who was born to be impotent. The low probability of pregnancy didn't mean that there was no possibility of winning. The welfare lottery only had 1 in 100 million. The probability was so low, but there was still the birth of the chosen one every season. Fengzhen had a son, Fengyi, so naturally, he wouldn't think that he couldn't have a child. So what if his wife was pregnant? Must it be because of old Wang next door? If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't beat his lord, Jiang Pingji, Fengzhen would have fallen out with her on the spot. "Goodbye, our friendship is over." "Then why did you say that you were panicking and afraid? You said it yourself, I didn't force you to say it." Fengzhen was speechless. Actually, that wasn't what Fengzhen wanted to express. Your subject is indeed panicking and afraid. If this child can't be kept and dies. He had always thought that he wasn't fated to have children, so his first child, who was so good, was also killed by him. With such a thought, Fengzhen naturally felt an indescribable fear of having a second child. He wasn't afraid of the child itself, but he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to keep this child. He didn't dare to go back and face his wife for a long time, so he could only use work as an excuse to avoid her, and give himself time and space to think things through. However, before he could understand this matter, his lord came first, and he even made a fool of himself. Jiang Pingji also understood what Fengzhen was conflicted about. She said, "I come from a humble background, so I can't speak of any great principles. But there is one thing I understand. Since the child has set his sights on you, and wants you to be his father after reincarnation, it means that he is satisfied with you. How can you let the child down?" Fengzhen couldn't help but complain. "My lord, what you said is quite touching." Jiang Pingji said coldly, "I can say something even more touching. Do you want to hear it?" Fengzhen was speechless. Jiang Pingji said, "I heard that pregnant women are sensitive and think a lot. You leave early and come back late all day. Aren't you afraid that your wife will think too much? Maybe she thinks that you haven't changed, and that you took advantage of her inconvenience during her pregnancy to be seduced by a little demon outside? If the mother isn't good, the child will be even worse." Fengzhen was speechless. He had forgotten about this terrible thing. That day, Jiang Pingji heard that Fengzhen had left early again, an entire 2 hours early. This Feng Longzi is really getting more and more indecent. What if he delays the lord's business? Jiang Pingji glanced at the snitch. "What else can we do? Deduct his salary. Deduct so much that this fellow can't even afford milk powder and diapers. // book // Chapter 1856. On the road on the outskirts of the capital, the blue-robed young man looked at the lofty wall that was faintly visible on the horizon. His eyes couldn't help but light up a little. "Feng Langjun, it's windy outside. Why don't you rest in the carriage?" The curtain of the carriage was lifted, revealing a small and delicate face. There were a few freckles on her cheeks, but she looked even more cute and lively. The girl's invitation made the young man in blue fall into a trance, but it quickly turned into awkwardness. He rejected her and couldn't help but steer his horse away from her. Seeing this, the girl snorted and pouted. You look like a smart person. Why are you so insensible? The young man in blue had good eyes and ears. The sound of the carriage wheels wasn't loud, so he didn't miss the girl's complaint. His expression became even more awkward. At this time, the young man riding with them came forward and joked in a low voice. Brother Rongli, you're so boring. The lady is interested in you. But you, the goddess, dreams, the king has no heart. The lady is the daughter of a rich merchant in Sun Prefecture. Her father is very rich, and her business seems to be quite big. If you marry her, you can spend the rest of your life lying on a mountain of gold and silver. The young man in blue glared at him, but his eyes were so good that he couldn't feel any disgust when he glared at him. If you like it, go ahead. Don't drag me into it. His companion laughed. If I had a face like Brother Rongli's and talent, I would naturally try my luck and see if I could marry into her family and become her son-in-law. Unfortunately, the body that my parents gave me has already been decided. She doesn't like your blockhead. The young man in blue sighed helplessly. Seeing this, he could probably guess who he was. It was Feng Rongli, the eldest son of Feng Zhen, who had outstanding achievements in local politics and was transferred back to the capital. But he was unlucky. He accidentally got separated from his servant and didn't bring much money with him. Fortunately, he met the young man next to him, a Jianghu ranger who said he wanted to go to the ends of the world with his sword and punish evildoers. So he hitched a ride with him. This ranger companion was a warm-hearted person. His only flaw was his fondness for women. He would never stop fooling around. However, what made Feng Yi and her companions despair was that all the flowers and plants that were attracted had their eyes on Feng Yi. No matter how Feng Yi said he was engaged and that he had a fiancé at home, it couldn't stop his luck with women. The exuberant peach blossoms made Feng Yi tremble. His companion laughed at him for being timid. How could a man like a man be scared by a woman who came to him voluntarily? Feng Yi and Feng Yi's Feng Yi. How could he tell his friends that half a year ago, his fiancée had sent him a letter from home, along with a romance book with a seemingly strange plot? Oh, the author was Layman Zaiki, who had been growing more and more girlish these years. The book had a total of more than 30,000 words, and in a concise manner, it told the story of a high-ranking female official who took 7 tests to meet her fiancé, and finally got married and entered the bridal chamber. In layman's terms, this was the woman setting a trap for the man, one trick after another. Feng Yi couldn't help but break into a cold sweat for the male protagonist. What worried him the most was that there was a small note in the letter. Changxing asked him if he wanted to do the same. Feng Yi was worried since he was on his way. He was afraid that he would meet Miss Bao, the prostitute who sold herself to bury her father, the poor servant girl who was abused by her master. Of course, Feng Yi had not met any of these tricks since he had been on the road. But it didn't mean he was safe, especially when the ranger who was with him was a womanizer. Feng Yi was always nervous. You're such a boring man. Feng Yi frowned and said, a gentleman should be clean. His companion smiled and said, fine, you're a gentleman. I just want to be a playboy. Feng Yi frowned again, but he didn't say anything. When they were about to enter the city, Feng Yi declined the goodwill of the rich merchant and his daughter. His heart wanted to fly to the mansion. You really refused? His companion said, I can see that the father and daughter really appreciate you. According to the rich merchant, Feng Yi promised to marry his daughter, and he prepared a dowry of tens of thousands of coins for his daughter. Feng Yi was a scholar. He talked well and had an elegant temperament, but he dressed plainly. He didn't come from a good family. If he married this rich merchant's daughter, he would at least have financial support for his studies and career. Feng Yi said helplessly, I already have a fiancé. His companion was speechless. He really had a fiancé. He thought that Feng Yi was just finding an excuse to fool the others. Today was Feng Yi's first time in the capital. He could only follow the address given by his family. After asking many people, he finally found the location of the Feng mansion. His companion asked, Is your relative working for a rich family? When he found Feng Yi, the latter looked calm, but he couldn't hide his embarrassment. When he introduced himself, He only said that his relative was in the capital. He was going to rely on his relative. He thought that Feng Yi's relative was running a small business in the capital. He didn't expect that he was serving a rich family. While they were talking, Feng Yi saw the plaque of the mansion. Leading the horse forward, his companion asked, "We'll be beaten if we run directly to their gate, right?" How could the main gate of a high official's mansion be approached so easily? Feng Yi said, "It's okay. It's my home." His companion was speechless. Coincidentally, a carriage stopped in front of the Feng mansion. The curtain was lifted, and a woman in a blue dress with her hair in a bun came out. The servant girl held an umbrella for her. The servants all lowered their heads and didn't dare to look at her face. After a few years, Feng Yi recognized the woman at a glance. "Changsheng?" The woman stopped walking up the stairs and turned her head. Brother Rongli?" She seemed to want to run over, but as soon as she took a step, she restrained herself. But her eyes were shining with excitement. Feng Yi also walked forward quickly. He couldn't help but want to hug her, but he suppressed the impulse in the end. "Changsheng, I'm back." The two looked at each other for a long time, until a young cough broke the ambiguity under the calm surface. Feng Yi lowered her head and saw a chubby boy with a pink face standing by Changsheng's feet. "Changsheng, is this your future brother-in-law?" "Changsheng." Feng Yi thought that this little boy was Feng Jin's youngest son, and his age was suitable. But Changsheng said, "Not little brother, it's..." Before she could finish, the little fat boy stretched out his fat paw to Feng Yi and called out softly, "Big brother." "Feng Yi," Changsheng said helplessly, "this is Feng Yi, your second brother." As a punishment for mistaking her brother, Feng Yi could only smile bitterly and carry her heavy brother away. At this time, her companion realized that Feng Yi was the son of a high-ranking official. If he didn't do well outside, he could only come home to inherit his father's family business. He was a standard second-generation official. With Feng Yi's return, the family's worries were finally lifted. After the welcoming banquet, Feng Zhen looked at his eldest son, who had finally grown up. His eyes were shining. Back in the room, he took out an almanac from under his pillow and slowly flipped through it. "What are you looking for?" Wan Xiao finished checking the account book and found that her husband was still looking at the almanac. Feng Zhen said, "Looking at the auspicious date, the time should be set. Tomorrow go and discuss with Feng Huayu. The two families should settle the marriage as soon as possible. If this drags on, Changsheng will have to take up a post outside. When will the two youngsters be able to get married?" "Oh, I see you're anxious." Wan Xiao. She felt that Feng Zhen was getting more and more muddle-headed as he got older. Didn't Her Majesty say that the two children will be betrothed? The auspicious date is naturally decided by the palace. Why are you getting involved? There was a clatter. The almanac in Feng Zhen's hands fell onto his legs. He looked pitiful. Wan Xiao rolled her eyes and said, "Which wedding isn't prepared a year and a half in advance? If I let you do it, I would have offended the in-laws long ago." Feng Zhen. Wan Xiao took out a booklet from somewhere and threw it to Feng Zhen. She had already sent people to prepare the important items and valuable items in advance. Other than holding a booklet and picking a useless auspicious date, what else could Feng Zhen do? He was unreliable when he was young and still didn't know how to organize his son's wedding. Feng Yi could grow up to this point without becoming crooked thanks to the protection of his late wife in the underworld. Her Majesty had secured the betrothal. His wife Wan Xiao had prepared the betrothal gifts. His son was a handsome groom. He looked dashing in formal attire. His son had kidnapped a bride since he was young. She was a noblewoman with the highest status in his generation, aside from the two princes. Feng Zhen had no place to interfere at the wedding banquet. Time passed quickly. The only thing Feng Zhen could do was drink a few more cups of wine. He was so moved that his eyes were brimming with tears. As the one marrying off his daughter, Feng Jin looked at Feng Zhen's sobbing face. He wasn't even that sad about his daughter marrying off. Why was Feng Zhen crying first? If not for his wife, Wei Jingxian, stopping him, Feng Jin would have argued with Feng Zhen. What was he crying about? Was he dissatisfied with his daughter? Wan Xiao felt embarrassed and said in a low voice, "What are you crying about?" You've made a fool of yourself in front of the in-laws and the officials. Feng Jin said. Whenever I think about Rongli getting married, I feel terrible and suffocated. Wan Xiu'er. No, I'm saying that Rongli finally has a family. As his father, I'm happy and moved. Back then he was just a small ball. Feng Jin immediately changed his words. He made a pitiful gesture with his hands and said, when the midwife carried Rongli to me, he cried even more weakly than a kitten. At that time, I thought we couldn't keep the child. In the blink of an eye, more than 20 years have passed and Rongli is already married. Who knows, he might even become a father next year. Thinking about this, I have mixed feelings and can't help but want to cry. Feng Jin had a good tolerance for alcohol. Usually he wouldn't get drunk after 1,000 cups. He wouldn't even blush after drinking 1 or 2 jars of wine. But today, for some reason, he couldn't help but feel his eyes ache after only 2 cups of wine. It was his son getting married, but he felt like he was marrying off his daughter. That feeling of regret and satisfaction filled his heart. Thinking about his youngest son coming back after more than 10 years, Feng Jin felt even sadder. He really needed to suck on his chubby son to catch his breath. Where did Feng Yu go? Come, let him suck on some wine. Comfort his hurt father's heart. Feng Yu rejected the offer. How could his unruly father compare to Prince Yan? Does this count as satisfaction? Listening to the sounds of the wedding banquet behind her, Jiang Pingji, who was in disguise, couldn't help but sigh. Wei Si thought about Feng Jin's loss of composure and laughed. Yes, satisfaction. When a person is happy, the moon is round. Please remember the domain name of this book. Jiutian Shenhuang Mobile Version. Chapter 1857. Didn't they say that this animal is very fierce? The young man in brocade clothes used the stick in his hand to poke the dark wild man, who was locked up in the iron prison. It was said that the wild man in the iron prison was a child raised by a wolf pack. For some reason, he was separated from the wolf pack and was caught by a playboy who went out to hunt. They had heard of wolf children, but they had never seen a living one. He looked like a human, and there was nothing special about him. The servant standing next to the young man said in a trembling voice, he was fed medicine, and now he has no strength left in his body. He was very fierce before, and even bit someone's arm off. That ruthlessness made people shiver. Langjun, be careful. Don't let this animal hit you. The young man didn't know how this wolf child grew. He looked like he was about 10 years old, but he was as tall as an adult man. He was tall and strong, and his muscles were tight and full of explosive power. His 2 long legs had amazing jumping power, and he ran very fast. If it weren't for the large number of people in the hunting team, and the little animal hadn't eaten for a few days, it would have run away. The young man, who was called Lang Jun by the servant, sneered and deliberately poked the wolf child's face with the stick in his hand. Humph, he's half dead. Do you think I'm afraid of him? The servant flattered. Lang Jun, you're right. But this animal hasn't washed for many days, and his excretion is also like an animal. I haven't trained him well. If he's now, I'm afraid I'll dirty your eyes. I'll send him to you after he's washed and trained. The young man threw the stick away and said, remember to be quick. We're counting on him to turn the tables in the fight. The servant hurriedly nodded and bowed, as if giving a military order. The young man was not in the mood to listen to the servant's flattery. He waved his hand and signaled his guards to leave with him. He didn't see that when he turned around, a pair of dark and wild eyes stared at his face, full of bloodthirst. The young man didn't notice, but the servant did. When the young man left, the servant clenched his fist and threatened the weak wolf child. What are you staring at? Be careful, or I'll dig out your eyeballs. The wolf kid was raised by the wolves. Since he was born, he had never trimmed his hair. The servants thought it was too troublesome to do so, so they took a pair of scissors and cut off the dirty, smelly, and stone-like hair. Then, they pressed the wolf kid into the cold pool water to bathe him. Every time the wolf kid choked on the water in the pond, he would let out a sorrowful and panicked cry. The servants who were watching the scene would roar with laughter, as if the scene in front of them was very amusing. Half a month later, the wolf child was pushed into the beast-fighting gambling house as a secret weapon. To put it bluntly, the beast-fighting gambling game was just an entertainment for some playboys. They would starve their pets for 2 days before throwing them into the arena for them to fight to the death. The pets that participated in the death match were usually heinous prisoners on death row. The winner would live, and the loser would die without a complete corpse. In order to add to the fun, they would usually set up a prize. The winner would get the prize, and some playboys would take pleasure in this. They would groom death row prisoners to fight and win the prize, which would give them face among their peers. Of course, fights between humans weren't fun either. Sometimes, savage beasts would be thrown in to increase the number of variables. The wolf child was the secret weapon of the young man. In less than a year, the wolf child helped the young man win countless battles. As a price, he was covered with terrible injuries, some of which were so deep that his bones could be seen. Every time he left the arena, he would be drenched in blood. Some people would even laugh and applaud when they saw him bite off his opponent's throat. However, no matter how powerful the wolf child was, he was not invincible. Indeed, he had the fighting instinct of a wolf and a body that was stronger than many adults. But after all, he didn't know how to fight. When he met a capable opponent, he would only lose. When he lay in a pool of blood dying, his life seemed to be rapidly draining from his body. In a daze, his body was picked up from the ground, and the person seemed to be saying something. What a poor child. When the wolf child learned the human language, he learned that the person who saved him was called Fu Yang, a person who was taller, stronger, and more powerful than him. Every day, he was forced to learn the human language, learn the human handwriting, and practice martial arts at the same time. How could the wolf child be restrained? Naturally, he refused to be disciplined. As a result, he was taught a lesson. What, Fu Yang? Call me daddy. Fu Yang held a wooden stick in his hand and pinned the wolf child. His hands were held behind his back by the wooden stick, and he couldn't use any strength. The wolf child subconsciously growled like a beast, and the back of his head was hit hard. Speak human language. The wolf child. Brute force and no brain. I can beat 5 of you with one hand. Fu Yang sneered. The wolf child was forced to kneel on the ground. He twisted and struggled for a long time, but still couldn't break free. He was so anxious that his head was full of sweat. Beg for mercy. Learn to beg for mercy, and I will let you go. The wolf child's eyes were burning with anger, and he said in an unpracticed official language, Don't even think about it. Okay, you have a backbone. Then let's be like this. When you calm down and learn to think with your brain, instead of relying on brute force with your limbs, we can have a good talk. Fu Yang didn't loosen his grip and said with a smile, Let's see who gives in first. The two were in a stalemate from noon until the moon was high in the sky. The wolf child knelt until his knees were bruised. Fu Yang felt that the stimulation wasn't enough, so he asked his beloved concubine to feed him. The wolf child could only kneel and smell the food, but he couldn't eat it. Kid, do you see that? Fu Yang's mouth was full of oil, replenishing his lost strength. The wolf child was so tired that his lips were cracked, and his dark eyes were bloodshot. The wolf child bared his teeth at Fu Yang and stretched his neck to bite him, but his teeth were almost broken by Fu Yang's huge fist. You have to learn to be flexible, kid. Pure brute force will only make you die without even knowing how you died. Fu Yang grabbed a pair of chopsticks with his free hand, picked up a piece of meat, and put it next to the wolf child's mouth. I know you can understand human language. If you understand, then eat. If you don't, then continue to starve. After a while, Fu Yang heard the wolf child spit out a mouthful of bloody saliva, threatening him fiercely. I will kill you sooner or later. Yo, you've learned to talk tough? You've improved a lot, but you're still a little green. Fu Yang sneered. In this world, there are many people who want to kill me. The Meng family is not even on the list. Who do you think you are? When I die of old age, you probably won't have the chance. Fu Yang took pity on the wolf child and accepted him as his godson. He even gave him a name. In the future, you will be called Wang. Fu Wang. The wolf child thought that Wang meant expectation. Many years later, he learned that the name Fu Yang gave him was derived from, I hope that he will come back. Fu Yang's way of education was quite simple and rough, which was just right to restrain wild and unruly people like Fu Wang. Why didn't he learn calligraphy and the art of war? Beat him until he was willing to learn. Why didn't he learn the elegant language? Beat him until he could speak fluently. Why didn't he call him father? Beat him until he could call him father sweetly. If you don't have the power to resist, you have to learn to be flexible. This is called strategic hibernation. It's not a disgrace to conserve energy and endure hardships. Fu Yang stroked his adopted son's head. Every time he beat his adopted son, he would instill such thoughts in him. If Fu Wang admitted defeat soon, he would be beaten again. You're a wolf, not a dog. Why are you wagging your tail? You can't lose the courage in your bones. You're embarrassing me. Fu Wang. I'm afraid it's going to be difficult. Under such an education model, it was impossible for Fu Wang not to be crooked. I count on my fingers. You're about 21 or 22 this year, right? Fu Wang rolled his eyes. How did he know how old he was? Come son, let your uncle Da take you to a good place. You're an adult, you should learn some things. Uncle Da was the death row prisoner who had beaten Fu Wang to death. At that time, Fu Yang had saved Fu Wang by chance to save his old comrade, who had become a death row prisoner. Fu Yang adopted Fu Wang, and the latter became his only son. Uncle Da naturally became Fu Wang's martial arts master, and one of his elders. Learn what? Fu Wang was traumatized by it. Fu Yang smiled slyly. You'll know when you get there. It's a good thing. In the end, Fu Wang was still dragged to the women's room, and spent the night in a daze. Fu Wang was born to do this. At the age of 27 or 28, he became the most famous general under Fu Jing's command. Fu Yang was the spy that the royal family of Dongqing had placed in Songzhou to monitor the Mengs. The conflict between him and the Mengs had escalated. During that time, Fu Wang clearly felt that the atmosphere in the military camp had become strange. Fu Yang, the old man, also became haggard and thin at a speed visible to the naked eye. You're dying? Fu Wang happened to hear the doctor's words. He grabbed the doctor like a chicken and confronted him in front of Fu Yang's sickbed. Fu Yang smiled weakly. I'm so old. I'm not allowed to die of old age. Fu Wang pursed his lips tightly and said nothing. Fu Yang was only 45 years old. He had always been strong, and there was still a long way to go before he died of old age. A while ago, when the father and son were fighting, Fu Wang was suppressed by Fu Yang for a while with his rich experience. If Fu Wang didn't have the advantage of physical strength, he probably wouldn't have had the upper hand. How did he follow so easily? After Fu Yang finished speaking, his face suddenly darkened. If I die, remember not to mistreat your uncles. Otherwise, I'll crawl back to the netherworld and strangle you to death. Fu Wang's heart was filled with indescribable annoyance. Someone set you up? Who? The old bastards of the Mengs? Calm down. Fu Yang reprimanded with a displeased expression. What's with your reaction? Have your years of teaching been eaten by dogs? Fu Wang was so angry that he flung his sleeves and left. When he saw Fu Yang again, the latter was already in a dying state. Listen. Fu Yang used his last breath to say, it's not the Mengs. Don't look for the truth. In the middle of the night, Fu Yang passed away. Fu Wang was so angry that he smashed all the weapon racks in the drill ground. On the 7th day after Fu Yang's death, the Mengs, who had been at odds with Fu Yang for many years, sent someone to invite Fu Wang to be their henchman with a smile. Henchman, do you think you're qualified? The Mengs envoy didn't mind. After all, Fu Wang's temper was well known in Songzhou. Young general, don't you want to know how General Fu died? Fu Wang clenched his fists. He almost couldn't restrain himself from lifting the envoy and interrogating him. You, the Mengs envoy said. Young general, only our family head can protect old General Fu's life's work. Please think about it carefully. A thought flashed through Fu Wang's mind as he thought of a possibility. The royal family? But how could it be possible? Fu Yang, this old man, was loyal and devoted to the imperial family. If Fu Wang had the slightest disrespect, he would have been beaten into a pig's head. How could the royal family deal with old Fu? The Mengs envoy smiled meaningfully, but Fu Wang's heart sank. Is the emperor suspecting my adoptive father? The Meng's envoy said. Being with the emperor is like being with a tiger. The emperor's heart is unpredictable. This indirectly confirmed Fu Wang's speculation. Not long after, Fu Wang took the soldiers and confidants left by Fu Yang to join the Mengs. But they didn't listen to orders. In order to win him over, the Mengs used a lot of money, beauties, luxurious cars. The people of Tsangzhou only said that Fu Wang was an ingrate, who turned to the enemy, who killed Fu Yang after his adoptive father's death. Some of Fu Yang's old subordinates didn't understand. But Fu Wang did things his own way. The world was in chaos, and the Mengs took advantage of the situation to recruit soldiers and buy horses. The Mengs expanded, but they ignored Fu Wang, who was hiding in the dark. This guy turned the tables and took over the Mengs. He was then recruited by Prince Changshu, who was the most powerful at that time, and became the most valiant general. Prince Changshu knew that Fu Wang was a beauty, so he tried his best to find a woman for his beloved general. Fu Wang had a bad temper, and sometimes he would deliberately offend people. For example, he once said at a banquet that he liked Prince Changshu's beloved concubine. That beloved concubine was extremely beautiful, and it was said that her appearance was similar to Wang Huiyan, one of the two beauties of the Wangs. Prince Changshu used to be this talented woman's admirer, but unfortunately, the goddess married Xie, a boorish man. Because of this past, Prince Changshu doted on this beloved concubine, even though she was born in a brothel. Hearing Fu Wang asking for her, Prince Changshu hesitated. Was his beloved general more important, or his beloved concubine? Needless to say, his beloved general was more important. He felt uncomfortable, but he still generously pushed his beloved concubine, who was pouring wine for him, to Fu Wang's side. Being pushed by him, the wine pot in his hand fell to the ground, and the wine spilled all over the floor. The woman's expression changed slightly, but she still bowed meekly and came to Fu Wang's side to serve him. After the banquet ended, Fu Wang sat in the carriage with his eyes closed. His legs stretched out and occupied almost the entire space in the carriage. The woman could only shrink in a corner and lower her head. After a long time, Fu Wang loosened his collar and let go of the smell of alcohol. It doesn't feel good to be sent here and there, does it? The woman said in a low voice. This is my life. There's no such thing as feeling good or uncomfortable. Fu Wang sneered. You're very beautiful. If you serve me well, I won't give you away. The woman lowered her head. The carriage was dark, so he couldn't see her expression clearly. I'll listen to you, General. When that pair of soft hands touched his chest, Fu Wang smiled and pulled the woman into his arms. Prince Changshu also had a short life. When he was about to die, Fu Wang brought his men to seek refuge with Su Fei. Su Fei was forced to his death by Su Bei, and Fu Wang sought refuge with Su Bei. At the same time, he formed a grudge with Su Bei's advisor Han Yu. The grudge between the two was attributed to a celebration banquet. Han Yu couldn't stand Fu Wang's success, so he secretly mocked him. He originally thought that Fu Wang was a boorish man who didn't understand and was scolded. Who would have thought that he was a cunning man on the outside and hated Han Yu? After that, Su Bei was killed by Jiang Pingji, and Fu Wang wanted to jump ship again. But halfway through, he was caught by Jiang Pingji's advisor, Qiguan Rang. The crazy fan spirit, who still fanned himself in the middle of winter, looked at Fu Wang with a smile. General Fu, I haven't seen you for many years. How are you? Fu Wang curled his lips and mocked back. I'm very good. There's no cold in the winter anymore. Qiguan Rang threatened in a low voice. When General Fu meets my lord, you'd better think about what you say, lest you lose your head. Fu Wang didn't believe it, but in the end, he was taught a lesson by Jiang Pingji. He relived the years when he was suppressed and beaten by Fu Yang. Someone said to Jiang Pingji, he's just a lackey. How can we trust him so easily? Jiang Pingji said, he can't kill me. If he dares to betray me, he'll die earlier than me. The outside world thought that Fu Wang would continue to kill his boss and jump ship. Who would have thought that Jiang Pingji's life would be so tough? Speaking of which, Fu Wang's battle record was quite good. He almost never lost a battle. But his previous boss was too weak. No matter how fierce a general was, he couldn't save the situation from collapse. Not to mention, Fu Wang would occasionally smiley face, angle, when the world was about to be settled. Fu Wang did something that shocked the world, and caused the outside world to discuss it. He remarried his former beloved concubine as his legal wife. If one observed carefully, they would notice that after the appearance of his beloved concubine, all the women around Fu Wang gradually disappeared. She was the only one left. Taking a concubine as his wife? Ridiculous. Han Yu threw the invitation card away as soon as he saw it. He gave a small gift and did not show up himself. Do I need to discuss with them who I want to marry and sleep with? Too much nonsense. Instead of doing proper things, all they do is stare at people's backyard and 3 inches below their navels. Fu Wang cursed. Other than his lord, Jiang Pengji, and his beloved wife, he would not listen to anyone else. His wife sighed. My previous experience was indeed criticized by others, Fu Wang said. But what does this have to do with them? Did they sleep with me? He slept with his own woman, but he didn't do anything shameful in broad daylight. What was an outsider talking about? His wife forced a smile. In fact, she had wondered why Fu Wang was so in love with her. Once, he even made her drink a dozen jars of wine to get information out of her. The answer was, beautiful. Fu Wang replied drunkenly. Beautiful. Look at this face, look at these hands, look at these feet. I like everything. When his wife heard the answer, she felt much more at ease. She was grateful to Fu Wang for having a shelter in this chaotic world. She was not like a rootless duckweed drifting everywhere. Genius 1 second remember site address. Mobile version M. Chapter 1858. Jiang Yan's courtesy name was Huiping. The Book of Rites said that when a woman was about to marry, she would have her courtesy name. It meant that a woman could only have her courtesy name when she was of age and was about to get married. The character in Huiping meant rise and also referred to marriage. That was why there was the phrase waiting to be betrothed. However, this meaning took on another meaning when the first female emperor of the Jiang dynasty ascended to the throne, and the new crown prince completed the ceremony. Even if I take it, no one will say it. After a long time, except for the history books, no one will remember this character. The coming-of-age ceremony was very complicated. Even though Jiang Yan's physique was different from ordinary people, she was still a little tired after being dug up from dawn until the moon was high in the sky. However, she did not complain no matter how tired she was. Today's ceremony was not bad at all. Jiang Yan knew very well that from today onwards, her mother would slowly retire. When she could truly hold her own and suppress all the civil and military officials in the court, she would abdicate and hand over power. From assisting the crown prince to the real emperor, the meaning and responsibility of the two were completely different. Jiang Yan knew the heavy responsibility on her shoulders from a very young age, and had long regarded it as a part of her life. But I see that your highness is slightly happy. It is obvious that you like it. Other than Jiang Yan, there was also a slightly older youth in the hall. The youth was still wearing his court robes and looked slightly frail. Jiang Yan smiled. Of course I like it. I heard that mother prepared this character for a long time, and hesitated for a long time before choosing it. Everyone in the court knew that His Majesty was terrible at naming things. In the early years, some ignorant officials wanted to give the younger generation in the family favor, and shamelessly asked His Majesty to give them a courtesy name. In the end, it was always the scene of a car accident. No matter how many choices others made, His Majesty could always choose the most unpleasant one. Smiley face. Angle. The character Huiping was also very ordinary, but the meaning was simple and straightforward. It was not unpleasant to hear. It seemed that His Majesty really put in a lot of effort. Jiang Yan rolled up the sleeves of the youth's court robes in boredom. A few days ago, Grand Tutor came to me and told me about you. Don't you want to hear what he thinks of you? The young man raised his eyebrows and asked in surprise, Grand Tutor knows? He had even kept this matter a secret from his parents. His father and mother had always thought that he was close to the crown prince, because he was placed in an important position. A few days ago, they had been nagging him about marriage, but the young man had found an excuse to dismiss them. His mother was still all right, but his father was an old fox who had walked through troubled times. The young man had always been a little proud of himself for deceiving his father, Feng Zhen. He did not expect that someone would still find out. This person was also Her Highness's teacher. Based on the clues he had discovered over the years, the young man had also figured out the other identity of the other party. I know he's against it. My words at that time were a little harsh. I'm afraid I've hurt his feelings, the youth said. Worry leads to confusion. Grand Tutor, this is also the prince in your heart. Jiang Yin said indifferently, indeed. However, Grand Tutor is right. Feng Yu, are you really willing? As he asked, the conversation he had with Grand Tutor Wei Xiai surfaced in his mind. Your Highness, do you know what the outcome will be if you choose Feng Yu? With Feng Yu's looks, he will definitely be an important official in the court in the future. How could he be willing? He was young and frivolous, making a promise without permission. What if he goes back on his word in the future? Grand Tutor, you're thinking too much. I'm the future ruler of the world. How can I be restrained by a man? It's enough that both parties are in love with each other. What else does Feng Yu want? One day, if he really has a change of heart, I'll secretly grant him a death sentence. The secrets of the royal family and the dignity of the emperor cannot be tarnished. Only the dead can keep their mouths shut. I can let him rise rapidly, but I can also consign him to eternal damnation. Life and death, honor and disgrace are in my hands. If he wants to rebel, it's up to me. Jiang Yin was conceited, but on some matters, she was calmer than her mother. Wei Xiai was stunned for a moment, then asked, Is he willing? Jiang Yin asked doubtfully. Why not? Behind the scenes, he's the man of the emperor. In front of others, he's the second son of the Feng family. He's an important official who holds great power in the court and is deeply favored by the emperor. There are gains and losses. To get all this, he has to give up some things. For example, the inheritance of the clan, a normal marriage. If that doesn't work, I'll give him a male heir in the future and secretly bring him back to inherit the clan. The court today can't tolerate so much willfulness. If her mother Jiang Pingji did not give Wei Xiai a proper name because of the situation, then Jiang Yin had never thought of giving Feng Yu a proper name. If it wasn't Feng Yu, it could be someone else. It wasn't like she had to be alone. She and Feng Yu were in love. Rather than saying that they liked each other, it would be better to say that Feng Yu was the man of the same age that she was most familiar with. They didn't hate each other. They were familiar with each other. She also had the confidence to control everything about Feng Yu without going overboard. For Jiang Yan, who only cared about politics, Feng Yu was the most effortless and worry-free choice. The country, the court, and the people were what she should be concerned about. A man was just a necessary condition for her to give birth to an heir. If Feng Yu hadn't taken the initiative to expose this layer of window paper, Jiang Yin also planned to get someone to find a suitable target in private. If she chose to do so, she would most likely kill him after using him. Jiang Yin needed a seed that could make her pregnant and give birth to a high-quality heir, not a man who would take care of the backyard for her. She didn't need any hidden dangers. However, Feng Yu was the son of an important minister in the court, Feng Zhen. He was also one of the heavenly sons. Since she could not kill him after using him, she could only keep him for future use. Feng Yu also agreed? Jiang Yin said. He took the initiative to mention it to me. I feel that this person is very tactful. He was my study companion since I was young. It's good to know him well and use him. Anyway, I have to have an heir. Why not find someone who is pleasing to the eye, tactful, and can help? At least I don't need to get to know him. Wei Xiai sighed. Compared to his father, Feng Yu's ability to read people's minds surpasses his father. He understood Jiang Yan's thoughts. He took the initiative to give in and sacrifice himself in exchange for a favorable impression. I like to deal with smart people. Feng Yu is very tactful. There's no need to think too much. There's too much deception in the court. It's rare for someone to be willing to be honest with me. This feeling is quite refreshing. Jiang Yin said lightly. Grand Tutor, you don't have to worry that I'll be at a disadvantage. No matter how clear Feng Yu is about my thoughts, I allowed him to see it. He can't turn it over. Faced with Jiang Yan's question, the youth Feng Yu smiled and held her hand to touch his face. To be by Her Highness's side has been my obsession in this life. Now that it has finally come true, why should I regret it? He was educated to give everything for the person in front of him. Feng Yu did the same. But he also had his own selfish motives. Other than himself, no one else could have closer contact with her. Feng Yu had thought that he would be an exception to her. Until Jiang Yin revealed the idea of looking for a good seed, he knew that he was wrong. With Wei Xiai as an example, Feng Yu also knew what risks he would face if he dared to like the crown prince. In Jiang Yan's eyes, the political affairs would always belong to the first wife. He could only be a virtuous and capable second wife. Want to be promoted? He would only have a chance if he endured for more than 20 years until she abdicated. Even if the chance was slim, there was still a chance, right? Jiang Yin said. Then remember what you said today. Otherwise, you will know how different I am from Mother. Mother would not kill Wei Xiai, but she would kill Feng Yu. Feng Yu said respectfully, I will remember. Jiang Yin dealt with most of the government affairs that had piled up for the day. Then she asked the servants to prepare hot water to bathe and wash up. When she came back, she said to Feng Yu, It's late, let's settle down. Feng Yu's eyes flashed with a trace of astonishment. Seeing his reaction, Jiang Yin seemed to emphasize angrily. After today, I am already an adult. What can't I do? It was just sleeping with a man. As the crown prince, why couldn't she do it? Feng Yu. As Crown Prince Jiang Yan's most trusted person, Feng Yu also had his own place to sleep in this palace. But today was different. He did not sleep in the side hall that he usually slept in, but in the main hall's main courtyard, on the crown prince's bed. The next day, Jiang Yin specially asked the servants to prepare red dates and white fungus soup for breakfast. She hated sweet food the most. Red dates had been on her blacklist for a long time. Suddenly hearing that Her Highness wanted red dates and white fungus soup, the kitchen was a little confused. Red dates, blood-nourishing. The serving maid then remembered that Her Highness's period had just ended 2 or 3 days ago. But Her Highness's blood volume had always been very small. She usually left after 1 or 2 days. It shouldn't be to the extent that she needed to drink red dates to nourish her blood, right? I just suddenly wanted to taste it. Why do you think so much? Unlike Jiang Yan's deep hatred for red dates, Feng Yu was extremely fond of them. Yesterday, it seemed that even his mouth had the taste of red dates. Jiang Yan suddenly didn't hate it so much. She wanted to taste it when she got up in the morning. So she asked the servants to bring red dates and white fungus soup. The taste was not as strong as yesterday's. After drinking a bowl of red dates and white fungus soup, this thought floated in Jiang Yan's mind. After the coming-of-age ceremony, Jiang Yan's busy days became more and more intense. She was still the crown prince in name, but the government affairs she handled were no different from those of the emperor. The frequency of her mother's advice also increased. Mother's body is getting weaker. Jiang Yan's mood was indescribably complicated when she saw that her mother, whom she admired since childhood, was also weak and sick. Feng Yu said in a low voice, It's said that His Majesty privately ordered people to make new dragon robes 2 months ago, and the size is the same as your highness's. The abdication of Jiang Yan had been rumored since the day she became an adult. This was a signal from His Majesty to test the officials. Now that even the dragon robes had begun to be made, it was obvious that the abdication was approaching. Jiang Yan said, Mother wants to abdicate. All the officials know about this, but whether she can abdicate successfully, I'm afraid it won't be as Mother wishes. She had long expected that her mother would make a big move before abdicating to remove the last obstacle before her ascension to the throne. But she never thought it would be such a big move. In one day, 2 of Jiang Yan's 3 blood relatives died, and the other one was half dead. When she heard that the Grand Tutor was forced by the rebellious officials to commit suicide in front of the palace, she felt as if she had fallen into an ice cellar, and an endless chill rushed from the soles of her feet to her brain. Wait Song! These 2 words seemed to be squeezed out of her molars. Feng Yu saw the strong killing intent bursting out of her eyes. Your Highness, His Majesty summons. Feng Yu lowered his head and didn't look directly at Jiang Yan's face. He also knew that Jiang Yan probably didn't want anyone to see her expression right now. Jiang Yan's hands clenched into fists in her sleeves, and she stepped into the palace with a stiff posture like a wooden statue. A group of important officials knelt in front of the dragon bench. Her Majesty's face was pale and tired. She ordered Qiguan Rang to be the assistant minister, and read out the imperial edicts that had been prepared long ago. Imperial edicts came one after another. Not only were there abdications and orders for Jiang Yan to ascend to the throne, but there were also punishments for the rebellious officials and traitors, including Wei Kong. Jiang Yan looked at her mother on the dragon bench, and not a single tear could be squeezed out of her sore eyes. Her mother had calculated every move and prepared a complete set of imperial edicts. Only the punishment for Wei Tsong had been passed down orally. Why? Because she had never thought that Wei Tsong would be involved, much less that Wei Ci would die. Her mother, who had never failed in every endeavor, had lost miserably in the last round. She had truly lost everything. Wei Tsong was punished to guard the imperial mausoleum for 12 years, and was not allowed to leave before the deadline. 12 years was enough for Wei Tsong to think things through, and it was enough for Jiang Yan to let go of her desire to kill him. Mother won't be around for long, and now she even wants to scheme against her daughter? So what if she wanted to kill Wei Tsong? Once the person in front of her, Long Yubin, became the late emperor, who in the world could stop her from killing a person? Her mother said, if he really did kill him, you'd be the one regretting it. Jiang Yan said, but he killed 2 of my family members. Her mother smiled bitterly. It's not his fault alone. Your father, and I also have unshirkable responsibilities. We've treated him badly just like you. This was the first time Jiang Yan had heard the words me and your father from her mother's mouth. The moment she heard these 2 words, tears flowed out of her eyes like she was about to collapse. I've really treated you badly. You should have lived for me. However, how could a person at the end of his rope still live? Before the morning sun rose, the funeral bell rang. Under the support of her officials, Jiang Yan became the rightful monarch. Mother didn't wait until the day the sun rose. Nor did she wait for the opportunity to abdicate the throne and travel the world with that person. Jiang Yan held back her emotions. As she handled her mother's funeral, she ordered people to secretly handle Wei Ci's funeral rites. As for Wei Tsong, she didn't even want to hear his name. Not many people knew about her envy, jealousy, and indescribable hatred for Wei Kong. A farce took away 2 insiders. The only one left accompanied her through the most difficult period of her life. It was only when the coffin carrying her mother's body entered the imperial mausoleum that everything settled. Outsiders thought that there was only her mother's corpse in the coffin, but they didn't know that Jiang Yan had placed another corpse. If someone dug up Wei Ci's grave at this time, they would discover that the corpse in the coffin had disappeared, leaving only a set of court robes. Did you see that? Jiang Yan left the imperial mausoleum before she ordered people to put down the dragon-snapping stone. She muttered to Feng Yu without rhyme or reason. Feng Yu replied, this official saw it. This is the result of being too sentimental. Jiang Yan sneered. As an emperor, why do you need so many unnecessary and burdensome emotions? Feng Yu looked at the main tomb of the imperial mausoleum and sighed faintly. Although Wei Ci's mistakes could prevent him from taking detours, it also increased many obstacles. He had thought that if Wei Ci could endure until His Majesty abdicated the throne, he would be able to kick aside government affairs and ascend to the throne. Now it seemed that his hopes were slim. The example of his parents had left a deep psychological shadow on His Majesty. He didn't know if he could get over it in this life. 12 years later, His Majesty looked at his daughter, who was reading late into the night, and let out a complicated sigh. Feng Yu said, "Your Majesty, did you go to see him today?" For so many years, Feng Yu had never dared to step on a landmine. He had always addressed Wei Tsong as he. His Majesty said, "I did. He's not young anymore, but he's still alone. He's as simple as before. He hasn't made any progress after so many years." Feng Yu was startled when he heard that. He was very familiar with Her Majesty, so he knew that her tone when she mentioned Wei Tsong was completely different from before. "I forbade him from stepping foot into the capital for the rest of his life, but I will give him a chance if his son is promising on account of his old friendship with the Grand Tutor." Feng Yu listened without saying a word. Her Majesty continued, "I quarreled with him. It was the only time in my life. I felt much better after saying what I wanted to say." She was jealous of her younger brother, but because of her status as the heir apparent, she had to learn to restrain her true emotions. After so many years, when she saw her blood relative again, she found her former jealousy somewhat laughable. Because, while she was jealous, envious, and loathed her younger brother, she also deeply loved him. He was the only thing her parents had left her. When she was young, she would definitely disdain to admit this, but when she was middle-aged, she felt that there was nothing to hide. Feng Yu wasn't surprised to hear this. Her Majesty's study had a few paintings with Wei Tsong in them. If she really wanted to never see her younger brother again, would those paintings still be an eyesore to her? Another 14 years later, Jiang Yan abdicated the throne. Feng Yu said ruefully, "It wasn't easy, but I finally made it." Jiang Yan had been on the throne for a few years longer than the former emperor. When she abdicated, she was healthy and without any illness. Chao Zhongwu had long changed his appearance. When he first came to Jiangnan, he heard that a famous painter of the Jiang dynasty lived in seclusion there. Jiang Yan and Feng Yu glanced at him from afar. Wei Tsong had inherited the Grand Tutor's appearance and temperament. From afar, it was as if that person had been reborn. "Your Majesty isn't going over?" Wei Tsong had traveled the mountains and seas with his wife, never knowing that someone sent by his sister was secretly guarding and protecting them. Jiang Yan retracted her gaze and indifferently turned around. "I don't want to see him." She had said that she wouldn't see him again in this life. She wouldn't easily break her promise. She was indeed relieved, but she didn't know how to interact and talk with her younger brother. After thinking about it, she felt that it wasn't good. Genius 1 second to remember this website's address. Mobile version. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.